Yeah. Because of that thing. Yes.
So keep on. I work at voice so I can work for you. Got it.
11th hour.
He's coming now.
We're going to look at it.
What am I doing? Pressing the red button? Yeah.
Yes. I'm ready to go. They'll settle in. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you this evening to the Planning Board hearing for articles that will be coming up at the town meeting. Thank you for taking the opportunity to show up tonight. I really do appreciate it. We've got a few short orders of business that we'll attend to before we begin. For those of you who have not been to one of our meetings before, when we do public hearings, generally the order of business is for us to hear from staff. The board will comment on things, and then we'll open up the floor for public testimony. Depending upon how many people are going to check in, I may limit some of the conversation down to about 2 minutes. So I'm going to ask you to kind of be a little respectful about things. If your neighbor has said exactly everything you wanted to say, please just get up and say, I agree with that, and we'll just move right along from there. If any questions come up or anything, we'll try to work with you as best we can. I have a request tonight as well to move articles numbers 44 through 48 to the beginning of the agenda, and I'll discuss that with my board in a minute. If you're here for Article 57 this evening, that will not be scheduled. And that article, if you just keep your eye on the paper, or if you want to check in about it, it will come up at a planning board hearing. Just check in with staff or keep your eye on the paper when we put in our public notices. So, planning board members, I would like someone to make an approval.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
On the articles that we're moving, it would be two Articles 51, the group from...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
44 to 51.
44 to 51?
Correct.
All right. I apologize for that.
problem.
So 44 to 51. Thank you, Andrew. Absolutely.
Through the chair, staff, which one was Hooper Farm Road?
44.
Yes.
And, all right, so that's being moved up with everybody else, okay.
Yep.
Because didn't you want to make an announcement, or wait till you get there?
I think we're going to wait till we get there.
Okay.
Yes, we're going to just
I
kind
don't
of...
want people hanging out here that don't have to stay.
I understand. We'll try to be as brief as possible about things. Okay. So, planning board members?
I'll make that motion.
All right, thank you. Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Just please realize as well, too, we have our alternates with us tonight. They're here, but they can't vote on any of these. But I really do appreciate them showing up in terms of their support, and they can kind of give us public feedback if they need to with things. So, and I do understand Mr. McLaughlin will be here shortly to round out the board of 4 members. That's why we're a few minutes late. So thank you. With all that in front of us and taken care of now, that's going to bring us to Article 44. This is a
Mr.
zoning
Chairman?
map change from R10 to C-Tech. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. If we want to do that first, before we get into the other public hearings, we have just a housekeeping on setting our next dates.
Sorry, Andrew.
That's okay. You can go,
I thought we were all set to go, but go ahead if you need to.
okay, I just need for the planning board to, for any continuations, any hearing that is continued,
Yeah.
we have your February 10th regularly scheduled business. When we need to set another time, it would need to be after February 25th.
All right.
So We had talked about the 27th. I guess that conflicts with school vacation, so if there's another date, we need to establish that
Okay.
for continuations.
All right.
It's like a Monday after school vacation.
Into March.
Is that March?
Oh, no, we have a planning commission meeting on March. whatever
March
it is.
3rd, we have a NPNEDC meeting. The Thursday would be 6th, March 6th.
Make that happen.
Is that too
Let me
late?
just, I'm just
No.
going to check one thing real quickly. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, March 6th, beautiful. All right,
Thank you.
we good?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, I appreciate it. All right, let's try this again. All right, so the first article we're going to hear again is Article 44. This is a zoning map change from R10 to C-Tech for properties located off of Trotters Lane, Parker Lane, Fairgrounds Road, Gray Avenue, Hooper Farm Road, Surfside Drive, Surfside Road, Quail Lane, and Dias Road. This is a Dias Road citizens article. Andrew, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind, because I think you've got...
Certainly.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, we've received an email from the sponsor, principal sponsor of this article, that they wish to withdraw it. And I would, based on that representation and the level of opposition we've had to this article, perhaps the board would entertain a motion not to adopt this article, and we could move on.
I make that motion.
All right, so the motion is made and seconded, and I trust there was no one, the sponsor wasn't here? That was an email from them?
That was an email.
All right, and I don't see anyone jumping up at this point. All right, so the motion is made and seconded. I think people are pretty familiar with this, believe me, with the letters that came out at this point, and I don't see anyone popping up out of the audience saying, can you please explain what we just talked about? All right, so that motion, yes, sir.
Would that still go to town meeting?
It will.
on the warrant.
It will be on the warrant for town meeting. It could theoretically be reopened at this point. But like I said, I know the FinCom generally will support the recommendations from the planning board, so that doesn't worry me too much. Realize that, unfortunately, once an article is submitted into the warrant, it can never be withdrawn. But this is the way this is the other way that you would dispose of it. Okay? So just because tonight we're going to say we really don't want to take any action or give it a negative recommendation, doesn't mean at last minute at town meeting it can pop its head back up. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any other technical questions floating out there? Kara, good evening.
Good evening. That being the case, would the planning board entertain a thought of making a negative recommendation for this?
That's what we just voted.
Okay.
We just put it back
We're
there.
we're about to vote on it at this point, but that's
That was the motion.
the motion is made and seconded to give it a negative recommendation. Are there any other questions on this article? Because I know it drew a lot of response. I'm just going to give a second here for Linda's being very kind to bring John up to speed here.
No, we're doing it now.
Thank you for doing that. All right, so there's been a motion made and seconded to give this article a negative recommendation from the planning board. Is there discussion, is there further discussion at this point? Yes, ma'am?
We're giving it a negative recommendation. Can we add a little phrasing as to why we're making a negative recommendation? In no uncertain terms?
Not to
Well-
adopt. Not to adopt.
Because I think if it's going to raise its head again by some random person at town meeting,
Yeah.
I think, being that we should probably state that we received dozens and dozens of letters in opposition.
Okay.
The planning board didn't feel it was an appropriate zoning change at this time, da-da-da.
Yeah.
Just something a little bit longer. I was at a FinCom meeting. This is on. I was at a FinCom meeting last month, where there was some concern about the fact that we don't explain, and I brought this up with the staff earlier, that we don't explain necessarily what these articles are about or what our recommendation is based on. And there was just a couple of blurbs here and there, and I think this is one of them because there was so much public opposition.
Sure. Andrew, you think
Yep,
you...
Mr. Chairman, we typically do insert comments. That is a separate motion. I don't know if you're ready to draft those tonight. We could consider a comment at a future meeting.
Okay.
But we certainly can, and if that's the will of the board, we can have that included.
All right, we're going to find out in another second here. You go with that, too?
Yeah.
There's a second.
But
Okay.
we haven't really voted the other one. Still in the second phase.
All right. So if we're all clear on the motion at this point, and all those in favor? Pardon? Yes?
Andrew, when you make up there, could you put in there that the people that put the article in withdrew it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. We'll be duly noted. Further discussion?
Nope.
Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Mr. McLaughlin, are you in the affirmative, sir? Well, I know, but, okay, he's still nodding his head, he's in the affirmative. Okay, thank you, everyone. So that's Article 44. I'm going to give you a second before we move to Article
Close the public
45.
hearing.
Barry, you gotta make a motion.
They
Oh,
were
sorry, you
here
know what?
against this, the first one.
Yeah, no, you're
So,
right,
okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, the guy withdrew it.
3-0. Yeah.
All right, let's, can I do that now?
Yeah.
And second.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, thank you.
To actually close the
Thank you.
public hearing.
I know, we got to get into the motion of doing it. I'm sorry, I'm just, yeah, I'm a little under the weather.
Do you want me to do this?
Ladies and gentlemen, excuse me up and back. I'm sorry, we've got orders of business we need to attend to. So respectfully, I'm just going to ask you, please bring your conversations outside if you need to. Thank you, I really do appreciate it. I appreciate you showing up. Okay,
Article 45.
next thing before us at this point is Article 45, which is a zoning map change from RC2 and R20 to CN for properties located off of Goldfinch Drive, Gregland Avenue, Lovers Lane, Dave Kim Lane, Nancy Ann Lane, and Old South Road. Andrew, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the screen behind you, before we get into that series of articles, I think it's important to review the Nashup Crossing Area Plan. Behind you is the area plan boundaries that we reviewed, and it shows the existing zoning for that area. You see that the Nashup subdivision is here, which was moved out of RC2, the purple, into R5 some time ago. The balance of the majority of the area is RC2, which I don't think I need to go over with you again. Our ongoing efforts to phase out that particular district. And there's also a group of R20 here. Next slide, Catherine. This is a summary of the NCAP history. Since you are all members, except our alternates, are all members of the NPNEDC, I'm sure you remember discussing this plan at the meeting. It follows the format of the entire master plan and the state law. There are 9 elements. It's scheduled to be before the NPNEDC for adoption on March 3rd. Next slide. There are a series of articles, 45 through 51, that relate to implementation. Articles 45, 49, 50, and 51 are map changes. Article 46 was a citizen article to create an overlay district, which we'll talk about in Article 47. We're recommending no action on the citizen article. The basic outline identification of properties from 46 is included in 47. And Article 48 is a citizen article discussing removing the current commercial retail cap within this Old South Commercial Overlay District under Article 47. Next. The master plan called, 2009 master plan called where the stars are located for commercial nodes in these locations. The red line is a quarter mile from these commercial centers. Again, when we developed this plan and when you approved it and when town meeting unanimously approved it, the intent was to create viable centers where existing commercial existed. As you know, the site of the star to the left is where the Valero and Glowacki property, former Glowacki, now Richmond properties are located. Next slide. So our first change, proposed change, is Article 45. This changes the majority of that RC2 district that we just looked at, and a portion of R20 at the edge, which is here, to the commercial neighborhood district. The CN commercial neighborhood is designed for commercial nodes that are located out of the downtown and the Mid-Island area. And so this is our start-off article. Basically, this removes some of the intensity of RC2. It changes the lot size from 5,000 square feet to 7,500. It increases the frontage from 40 to 50. It changes the ground cover from 50% to 40%. It does not allow single-family homes as primary uses. It encourages mixed-use development with compatible commercial and residential, and removes most industrial options. And we recommend the board consider adopting most, if not all, of this article, depending on the input. Thank you.
Board members? Yes, Linda?
Henry, do you think, unless I missed it, I was paying attention to the map, do you think it'd be useful to explain the difference between RC2 and CN?
I do think I did that, but I can go over it again.
Commercial uses that you can do now that you won't be able to do when it becomes CN?
Generally, the industrial uses are removed.
Restaurants?
There are large restaurants, small restaurants are allowed. Retail, office uses are allowed. RC2 allows supermarkets now. Commercial neighborhood would allow supermarkets. The size of them is determined in the Article 48, 47, 48 that we'll be discussing later.
Any other comments from the board? All right, this is going to be a public hearing, ladies and gentlemen, so please raise your hand if you'd like to be recognized, and we'll ask you to come up to the microphone and identify yourself.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, staff, folks in the audience, folks at home. My name is Dave Arminetti. I'm the Director of Real Estate Development for the Richmond Company, who, as the board and many folks know, are one of the primary landowners and stakeholders in the Naushop Crossing Area Plan area, along with the Valero family. We have interests in the north side of Old South Road in partnership with the Valero family on their roughly 13 acres of property, and interests on the south side of Old South Road on the roughly 40 acres of land that we purchased last summer from Mr. Glowacki that is located in the Naushop area. The remainder of the land that we purchased from him last summer is in the Surfside area and is not subject to this zoning discussion. I just had a couple of general comments that I think are worth making, and then
Please.
We'd be glad to address any specific comments or points that need to be made about the specific articles. But basically, we're involved in Articles 45 through 51 inclusive, which include the map articles and the overlay articles. We were integrally involved in the Naushop Crossing Area Plan process with the work group that was chaired by Ms. Williams and headed by the staff, who kept us in line when they needed to, successfully. It was a very inclusive and productive process, we thought, open. A lot of good discussion with our neighbors at Noshop, Witherspoon, Lovers Lane, and the entire neighborhood. We certainly support all the map articles and the resulting articles that were produced as part of that plan that are being discussed tonight. Fully support them. We can speak to them in more detail. As Mr. Vorst pointed out, I think the primary benefit here to the community as a whole, although a lot of focus has been on specific buildings and potential uses and tenants, is from an overall planning and land planning standpoint, the density and of the entire development potential for this area is coming down essentially by 25%. And a lot of the incompatibilities that were probably indirectly or inadvertently contained in the RC2 zoning district are going away. So I think we all feel good about that. So it was a good process. We feel good about where it is right now. We're looking forward to the process leading up to town meeting. We know there's a lot of work to do, and we're starting that process in conjunction with our neighbors. The only other 2 points that I think are relevant to this entire planning that we're involved in is many people are aware that as part of the process, one of our larger neighbors and abutters in this area, in fact, that takes up a full third of the Noshop Crossing area plan, is the Noshop residential community that has predated our ownership and have been neighbors with the Valeros for the better part of 20 years. They were integrally involved in the process as well, with a number of their board members and leadership, and we had extensive discussions with them as the process went on, and those discussions were consummated through a formal written agreement that we've reached with their homeowners association trust, and they're represented by Attorney Weinman, who's here tonight, that can speak to their side of the coin, so to speak. But we do have an agreement with them that further looks at the planning and land use issues related to this and has basically some additional restrictions and agreements that we and the Valeros have agreed to be bound by indefinitely in the future as an encumbrance against the properties that further reduces square footage, implements some additional planning provisions by way of setbacks and limitations, including hours of operation that we've all agreed to that we think makes sense for all parties involved. We also have a similar agreement with Housing Nantucket, who is one of our abutters up along Old South Road. The board members are probably aware several years ago, the Board of Selectmen in the town deeded Housing Nantucket about an acre of land in that area that fronts directly on Old South Road, and they're building their office headquarters and some housing over there. And we've reached an agreement with them where we're going to share access and utility planning and exchange a little bit of land so they can have a more efficient parcelization of their property, which will add to the open space of their property and will also allow them to build approximately 8 units of affordable housing as opposed to the 4 that they could develop today. And in exchange for that, we get some direct access to Old South Road and some more efficient utility passage through the property. So all those things are important parts of this to us. Again, we're looking forward to the process leading up to town meeting and in the future as we progress with our plans, and we're glad to discuss those in more detail tonight as appropriate.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience like to comment on this? Okay. Board members, is there anything else at this point? I don't see anyone else saying anything. So what's the pleasure of the board?
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
All right. And do I hear a second to that? Motion is made and seconded. For discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Let's have it unanimously. Pleasure of the board on this article.
I make a motion to support this article.
Okay. And do I hear a second to that?
Again, Andrew, most of mine are going to just have a statement of why, all that stuff.
Second.
So the motion's now made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Thank you, everyone. All right, next thing before us is Article 46. This is a citizens article. It's a zoning bylaw amendment to establish a new overlay district in Section 139-3 of the zoning bylaw entitled Old South Road Commercial Overlay District to include parcels off of Old South Road, Lovers Lane, and Nancy Ann Lane. Andrew, Leslie?
Mr. Chairman, I believe at this time we would ask that you not vote not to adopt on this article, since the basic properties have been included in the next article, 47.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
sponsor the article technically on behalf of my client, Richmond Company. And I would suggest that actually you pass over this for the moment, and assuming that you have a favorable recommendation on the next article, we would then agree that the appropriate way to handle this would be a negative recommendation to take no action.
Okay, great. Then,
I'll make a motion to pass over for the time being.
all right, so we'll just put this on hold for a moment. Do I hear a second to that? Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Okay, so that'll bring us to Article 47. We'll come back to Article 46. Article 47 is a zoning bylaw amendment to establish a new overlay district in Section 139-3 of the zoning bylaw entitled Old South Commercial Overlay District to include parcels off of Old South Road, Lovers Lane, and Nancy Ann Lane, and to insert a new Section 12L for the Old South Commercial Overlay District. Andrew or Leslie, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the map behind you is the limits of the proposed overlay district. And in your packet, you'll see that there's wording which explains the intent of this. This is to create a sub-area of the Nauship area plan, which would allow essentially the ability to, if the next Article 48 is passed, it would allow the ability to increase the retail cap from its current 20,000 limitation, which exists in all areas outside of the Mid-Island area overlay district. And it also includes a number of essentially design and almost like pre-permitting elements about increased distances and certain performance standards for businesses that might be included in this or developed in the future in this district. Much of that, if not all of the considerations, came out of the area plan work group and were suggestions that were negotiated with the group, Great Point Group and the Valero family on that property. It's important to remember that within that area, within each sub-areas of the overlay district, only one such building would be allowed. And again, there's some design parameters of where that is located to move any such building away from impacting the residential area.
Good.
All right.
Thank you. Board members, any comments? All right, hearing none. Yes, sir, Mr. McLaughlin.
I seem to be having two 46 and 47, and no 48.
All right, well, we're not on 48 yet, and I'll if you don't have 48, I'll lend you my materials, sir.
I don't know which one it is. It may be the...
Well, we're on Article 47 right now, sir. Okay. Thank you. So on Article 47, I'd like to open the public hearing at this point. Would anyone like to comment on this? All right. Board members, not hearing any public comment? Pleasure of the board.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
All right. Do I hear a second to that? Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. And the pleasure of the board on the article.
Make a motion to support the article.
Okay. And do I hear a second to that?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. That brings us back to Article 46, and the public hearing is still open on that. And I think you heard the recommendation of the board. Would anyone else want to comment on Article 46?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing on 46.
Okay, and do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Make
Ayes
a
have it.
motion not to adopt.
All right. And do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Thank you. That brings us to Article 48, which is a zoning bylaw amendment to remove language related to the MCD cap in Section 139-11K and to replace it with new language referencing the Old South Commercial Overlay District. This is a citizen's article. Andrew or Leslie, please.
Mr. Chairman, this article, we talked about it a little on the last article, would lift a cap on primarily retail MCDs. It would lift the cap in this one sub-area within the boundaries of the OSCOD. If you remember back to when that original article was passed, it was prior to much of the work that we've done with the master plan. And there was a concern at the time about large-scale retail buildings that might be allowed in numerous RC2 areas that exist around the island. As you know, through our work over the past pretty much 8 years, we've reduced that significantly. The figures that I have now, at least for RC2, is that has been reduced from roughly 1,700 acres to the current of about 289, and if the other passes, that will be closer to 200. So I think there may, I'm not entirely sure what all of the concern was then, but I believe that was part of it. And in some respect, there are very few areas now under zoning where such a facility could be built. There has been a lot of discussion about the ability for other stores to have an equal footing with other potential competitors. And I think it's clear that restricting the same use to certain sizes will have an effect on competition. So there's policy matters that maybe you should consider whether there's a good public reason for that. And that's why, I believe this citizen article raises some of those issues. And again, if the board needs additional time for us to get research on some of the discussions from that time, we could certainly do it.
Thank you. Board members? Any comment? No. All right. So, again, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to open the floor for the public hearing at this point. If anyone would like to comment on this? Mr. Collier?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cormac Collier, Nantucket Land Council. Many thanks to the Noshop area work group that has put a lot of time and energy into this, planning staff and other town officials. And that now brings us in terms of some of the recommendations to the process we're in right now. As you know, I attend most, if not all, the planning board hearings and before you in terms of your review of subdivision requests and sometimes major commercial development requests and some other requests as well. And I've also been in the past before you in terms of these public hearings as it relates to zoning or requests. And sometimes we've agreed on certain zoning changes, sometimes we haven't. But primarily all the time, the zoning changes that you're dealing with are neighborhood zoning changes. And it relates to sort of long-term planning of a neighborhood as a whole. For this article, it seems that your review and potential positive recommendation is essentially, in my opinion, you may disagree, giving a rubber stamp approval to the proposals that are before the town right now for 38,000 square foot building on Valeros and some sort of similar store on the Glowacki field. At least that's what I call it. At this time, I'm not saying you should either be for or against, because essentially we don't have enough information in terms of how this explicit MCD that's going to come before you is going to affect the town as a whole. Traffic, stormwater infrastructure, everything else. So what I'm trying to get towards you, and I may not have done that good of a job, is I'd like you to take no action. Because basically what you're going to do is you're going to go to the town, you're going to listen to the town to see what they say. If the town makes the zoning change, then you completely have an unbiased view in terms of them coming into you with the MCD application. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead, Linda.
I think you're making a few assumptions there. You're saying that by us supporting this article, we're tacitly agreeing that we're going to support a 38.5 and a 45,000 on the other side, which are in very limited building envelopes. I don't want to use language such as I resent that, but I do. Because when a plan is put in and you're jumping way ahead, we don't have any MCD request in here. We have existing MCDs at Valero's and Glowacki's, but clearly Richmond Company is going to be redoing those, and the Valero's are going to be redoing those. That doesn't presume that we're going to ignore the fact that there are traffic issues, access issues, regardless of how we all agree that need to be solved or not solved, or maybe it can't happen because they can't solve it. I'm not prejudicing myself one way or the other by supporting an overlay on the two remaining largest commercial pieces of property that are relatively undeveloped on the island and shutting the door on commercial development on this island. The aquifer has done a great deal to limit, the expansion of the aquifer has done a great deal to limit exactly where commercial uses can go, and the aquifer is under a substantial portion, Andrew can back that up, of the commercial zones. So we're basically hamstringing the economy and the commercial development on this island every single year at town meeting. By saying that I think that an overlay is appropriate for these two big pieces of property, with all of the conditions that were agreed to in the North Shop Crossing area plan and included in the plan and included in the private agreement between North Shop and Richmond and the Valero's. I'm not pre-prejudicing myself by voting in favor of something I've supported all along, because I did not support the 20,000 cap. But it has nothing to do with their development of another store, anything else that may occur out there. I thought it was bad planning to begin with, and by voting in favor of the overlay where they can go past 20,000 square feet, has nothing to do with any particular MCD which we don't have in front of us. On top of the fact that let's say we don't pass the overlay for these two remaining commercial pieces of property on a commercial corridor. They could conceivably right now subdivide it into 20 or 30 lots between the two sides and build 20 or 30 19,999 individual square foot structures. By allowing two larger entities in those very limited envelopes, which are not up there, you have to see the thing on paper, we're eliminating 20 or 30 of these things. So I think it's a win-win for everybody concerned by having one entity instead of 20,000 square foot entities, which are allowed now, which would cause all kinds of problems because there'd be multiple access for that instead of going to one entity. So wherever it washes out with the town meeting, I didn't support the 20,000 arbitrary figure in the first place 10 years ago, whenever that happened. I wasn't part of the Bag the Market Brigade, and I'm going to take these things as they come in one at a time. It has nothing to do with supporting this article.
Thank you. Just let me check with my board members for a second. Mr. Collier, and then I'm going to come to Mr. Reed.
The reason why I step back is Ms. Williams talked on and on and on about an overlay district, and you'll notice I didn't get up and oppose the overlay district. I think that's appropriate planning. What I'm talking about specifically is the article before you, the cap and the expansion of the cap. Well, the overlay district language allows a building from 20 to 45,000, but the cap is what caps it. So if you don't deal with the cap, the overlay district. Well, no, you have a lot of important things about the overlay district that the North Shop area people agreed to in their plan that has nothing to do with the cap. And just furthermore, look, wherever you guys go with this, it doesn't essentially matter in the end because it's going to be on town meeting floor. I'm just trying to basically describe to you in terms of your recommendation before town meeting. And what I would like to follow up and say is that what was presented on Tuesday or Monday and what is presented by a few things Ms. Williams said time and time again for the past 11 years that I've been here and before you, 14 years now, God, before you, is that every time, almost every time you have a significant subdivision or major commercial development or something that draws a lot of attention, one of the planning board members always say, the zoning is the zoning. Our hands are tied to the zoning, and because of the way the Massachusetts development laws are created, our master plan doesn't really mean a lot in terms of our ability to deny or approve a major commercial development. So that's why I'm just talking about how it relates to your future representation and review of the project. Again, I won't belabor the process. At the end of the day, it's going to go to town meeting.
I think I'm going to stop right here because Mr. Reed's been infinitely patient. He is here because this is a citizens' warrant article, and I think I'd like to hear from them, and then Matt, I'll come to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The point on this is not that we are in any way trying to get the planning board to take a position on the substance of allowing any particular proposal, but the fact is we have to be here because the planning board statutorily is charged with the responsibility for making recommendations on all zoning articles, and since the existing 20,000 square foot cap was put into place as a zoning article, anything relating to any modification of it has to come before the planning board. I'll go on record as saying I don't think that the planning board in any way should be committing itself to take any position on any specific MCD proposal that comes before it in the future. This is purely a matter of enabling town meeting to take action on it, to see what the people want to do. The planning board certainly should not take a negative recommendation on something as important as this that the town needs to consider. Rather, the framework here, I think, is appropriate. I think you should recommend that the article be adopted, and then when an actual application comes forward, all of the concerns about matters that the planning board needs to consider in granting an MCD, all of the evidence relating to the matters of public safety and traffic and so on, all of those issues will be before the planning board for a complete ab initio, start at the beginning hearing and consideration. So I hope you do, in fact, recommend the adoption of this article again, so that the process can go forward in an appropriate and orderly fashion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Matt, did you want to say something? Sir.
Yeah, a little bit.
Please.
I don't want to say too much that I want to say at town meeting, because I know that this is going to get a little bit of attention, needless to say, but I just want to respond a little bit to what Cormac said. The thing that, when he's mentioned about saying this is the zoning, this is what we have to work with, well, that's actually the opposite of what we've been doing for the last 9 years since Andrew has been director. And I'll call it the new age planning staff era. All we do is engage neighborhoods. This is what we've been doing for the last, when we have been reducing RC2, essentially the island has gone into a sort of an education process with staff, learning what they've been living, that's been under their feet all their life without even knowing what can happen. Now, if you look at one of the maps, Catherine, show Pinecrest for a second, if you can. See that right there? RC2 in Pinecrest Estates, still. That's up next in a couple of years. Hopefully we can fix it. What this group did when Mr. Galacki sold this land was essentially give up their by right uses, which is what Cormac was basically saying without saying it like that. They gave up a lot of by right uses. Why? Because of them. Because staff, because of the area plan work group, which is adopted with the master plan. And now we're here to sort of create a new footprint of what can and can't happen in an area that could have done a lot more than what is being proposed. What Linda's saying about what can be built other than a large store if we adopt this article, you'd have just as many people upset or more if there could be a whole bunch of big buildings instead of 2 large buildings potentially. The other thing that I want to mention is, back with the Bag the Market Brigade, as she called it, Nantucket has a unique way of saying yes and no to everything. And I'll be saying that again in April. Anyway, there was no controversy about whether we needed another store or we didn't need another store. And all the brouhaha that's gone on over the last, close to a year, which I personally think was a waste of time, because I think Stop and Shop does a good job. That's my personal opinion. But we'll never know if there is even a market for another grocery store if we don't make a place that's appropriate to build one, because right now you can't build one. You cannot build a store anywhere else. So what this is doing is it's allowing for the potential of a store. This is not a permit for a store. There's not going to be a store tomorrow because if we adopt this at town meeting. It allows for the process to start. That's what this is. Thank you.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, this public hearing is still open at this point. Would anyone else like to comment on this? Okay. Pleasure of the board.
Motion closed.
Do you think we should close this?
Hang on just for 1 second, John.
Okay.
I just want to get a little...
Through the chair.
Yeah, no.
Do you think we should close this?
Well, this is a policy matter before the board. It's up to you. If you think you've heard enough information, you can close it. If there's other things you want to consider, then you should keep it open and continue it to one of the dates that we talked about.
Right, and I think the thing that comes before the board is realize what we're going to wind up doing ultimately anyways is that this still comes before the town meeting floor, and that's really going to be where
Education.
it's going to be where the vetting of this whole thing comes into place. So whatever the final outcome of this is, it's still going to town meeting, and I think that's, again, that's where it's going to be. And Andrew's right. If there are other things that we need to consider at this point, then I would, and again, I'm not aware of anything personally, and I haven't heard anything from the rest of the board members, it would probably be prudent to close the public hearing, at least in my humble opinion, and then to move this thing ahead as the board pleases. Pardon? And then let town meeting begin to decide where this is all going to kind of shake itself out at. All right, so I'm sorry, the motion was to...
John made a motion.
Yeah, so
Close the hearing.
close the public hearing, and that is now seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Pleasure of the board.
Motion to positive recommendation to
All right.
town.
Okay, so there's a motion to support the article,
I'll
and
second
positive
it.
recommendation, that is seconded. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. Next thing before us at this point is Article 49. This is a zoning map change from RC2 and R20 to C-Tech for properties off of Nancy Ann Lane, Gregland Avenue, and Dave Kim Lane.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
on the map behind you shows this particular area. You see the majority of it is zoned RC2, and it does include one property at the edge which has commercial use on it and is in the R20 district. The proposal to move this to C-Tech, which stands for Commercial Trade, Entrepreneur, and Craft, is consistent with the activities taking place in this district. C-Tech allows home-based businesses and a variety of uses that we see here on the island, contractor shops, right, the wood construction-related businesses, storage and warehousing. It doubles the lot size, so it moves the lot size from 5,000 to 10,000, which is necessary for this kind of business. We would request that you support this article.
Okay. Board members?
Public hearing.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to open the floor for public hearing. Would anyone like to comment on this article? Mr. Arminetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave Arminetti again from the Richmond Company and Richmond Great Point Development. The only point I'd make on this particular article, because it relates to these areas specifically, is there's been a lot of focus on the planning in our area and our property about the potential commercial and retail along the frontage of Old South Road. But as we've talked to our neighbors, and as Mr. Paston, president of our company, mentioned in his discussion before the Civic League the other night, the core of our property here is just as important to us, and we think just as important to the island. And this area in particular is one that's going to be a particular focus of ours. There are a lot of smaller, thriving businesses on the island now that need to expand and need to modernize and get better facilities, and this is an area that we're really going to focus on in the upcoming years, whether it be Federal Express or Coca-Cola, or as Mr. Vorse mentioned, local contractors, local landscapers. Those are the main basis of the tendencies that we have in this area, and we're really looking forward to expanding on that, improving the quality of that area, bringing everything up to compliance and permitting, and this really does facilitate that. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the audience like to comment on this? Pleasure of the board.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
And do I hear a second? Motion's now made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously.
Motion to support.
Second.
Okay. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Thank you. That brings us to Article 50. This is a zoning map change from R20 to R10 for properties off of Gregland Avenue. Staff?
Mr. Chairman, on the slide behind you, you see that this row of properties is on the opposite side of Gregland Avenue, so facing the area that we just dealt with. CTEC, as I mentioned, is in a 10,000 square foot zone. R20 is a 20,000 square foot zone. We've had discussions before about lopsided areas where one side doesn't meet the other. There are some instances where that's appropriate. In this particular area, we don't think it is, and in addition, there's some infrastructure improvements and other, I guess, factors that we feel changing the zoning from R20 to R10 would be appropriate. Again, mainly for the character to match on both sides, and to help cover the costs of some of the infrastructure and other activities that need to take place.
Okay. Board members, anything? Ladies and gentlemen, if anyone in the public would like to comment on this, I see Mr. Collier rising to the occasion.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Cormac Collier. Essentially, this is the benefit, the carrot that Richmond is getting for, which I think is a good thing, changing RC2 on the other side to CTEC. If that's part of the negotiation, part of the process, I totally see where this is going. I just want to ask that question so I'm not on town meeting floor opposing this, for no, which I shouldn't. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could, it's part of the balanced approach towards dealing with this. So in almost all areas, there's significant turn back of rights. So yes, this does cover some of that.
Okay. Anyone else in the audience like to comment on this? Board members?
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
And do I hear a second? Second. Motion's made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously, and the pleasure of the board.
Make a motion to support.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Thank you. Article 51. This is a zoning map change from R20 and RC2 to R5 for properties off of Old South Road. Andrew, Leslie?
Mr. Chairman, again, if you refer to the map behind you, this includes some property that's owned, that's currently zoned RC2, and some that is zoned R20. We have had discussions with the Nantucket Affordable, trying to remember their name, Housing Nantucket. It's changed a couple times. The property that they own is this very odd-shaped property, which was, I think as you remember, we had years of discussion about Miller Lane. As you can see, this current configuration creates some very unusable land, and the narrowness creates some odd shapes for buildings. Through discussions with the Richmond Company and the housing group, there would be a plan to reconfigure this land. Their office is in another article here, which would stay in the commercial neighborhood district. They have housing on the skinny part here, which, by the way, the sewer is also under this particular property, which causes some building difficulties, which is a pressure main. So eventually, there would be a plan before you. It would be an approval-required subdivision to reorient this. And before we can get there, we do need a zoning change to make that happen. I would ask for your support for this particular article. Excuse me.
Thank you. Board members, is there anything you want to discuss on this? Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, if anyone would like to comment on this? Did you?
Motion to close the public hearing.
All right. Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Go ahead.
Motion to support.
And do I hear a second? Second. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Thank you. Yes. That will bring us back to the very beginning of where we're going to start here this evening. Yes?
Okay. Since we're on a roll, can we do the next three?
I kind of wish you had brought that up at the beginning of the meeting, ma'am, when we were changing it, we were changing things around. Was there a reason why that was going to happen? They're here. I know there's a lot of people here for a lot of things, and I for each.
There won't be that much time taken on these, the ones on the first page, to get to yours.
Trust me, we'll try to move as expeditiously as possible. Thank you. All right. 35. 35 is where we start, yes. There you go. Yeah, this is kind of a little broad in spectrum. For Article 35, this is a zoning bylaw amendment to Sections 139-4 and 139-12 to modify the flood hazard overlay district.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that we've had an initial conversation in the past about updating our flood hazard overlay district to current standards proposed by FEMA. The appeal period, basically to bring forward challenges to the new lines, has ended, and all activity has basically either been resolved one way or another on that. It's important to remember that if we do not include the new FEMA maps and references, homeowners will not be able to participate in the flood hazard program. I believe that the process, allowing for review, has progressed and is completed. So at this point, I would ask the board to support the amendment.
Okay. Board members, any questions? Any discussion? Ladies and gentlemen, if anyone in the audience would like to have public comment on this? And do I hear a second? Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. The pleasure of the board. Do I hear a second? Second. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Article 36. This is a zoning map change from LC to R5 for portions of Brant Point as recommended in the Brant Point area plan. Properties included in this article are located off of Stone Barn Way, North Beach Street, Easton Street, Cliff Road, Arbor Way, Harborview Way. Andrew or Leslie?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the map behind you shows the limits of the Brant Point area plan. That plan was approved by the NP and EDC, I believe, a year ago? 2012. Last year, we had a series of articles to implement the changes recommended by that article, and those were successfully adopted. This year, we have another series of changes. One of the most important is the phase-out of the limited commercial district, which was part of the master plan, and I believe we're either on time or maybe a year out because of the extra time that it took to complete that. Behind you is a brief history of the Brant Point area plan process, which we've already talked about. Next slide. As I said, the completion of the LC district that was started and is supposed to be completed per our schedule. RC and R1 are also districts that are being phased out. That work is still in progress, covered by this and other town meeting articles. The next slide, Catherine, shows the conversion of what are commercial property, currently commercial properties, and limited commercial is a commercial district. Like some of the other districts, it allows other uses, including single-family residential, which, as you know, we've discussed is part of the problem, especially those types of uses on the immediate commercial areas. There is a sub-area of this that is, oops, sorry. Hold on here. That is included in both articles. There's been some debate back and forth, and those are the properties here, which I believe the Brant Point area plan called to be residential to match their existing condition, and this sub-area here, which the Brant Point area plan called to become commercial. And so we need to resolve that since both areas are included in Article 36, which is this is LC to R5, 37 is LC to CN. Depending on your final decision, whether they go to a residential or commercial, they'll be stricken from the other article. They were included in both, so you could have a discussion, hear whatever testimony may be coming forward, and ultimately you'll need to make a recommendation one way or the other on the final article.
Okay.
Okay?
Board members, unless you have anything I'd like to go
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me for 1 minute, ma'am. Thank you. I promise I'll get to you in just 1 second. I just want to check in with my board first. All right, thank you. That's okay. Come on up. I didn't mean to scare you off. I just wanted to check in with my board first, and since they've got the courtesy, could you identify yourself for the record, please?
My name is Lisa Wendelkin.
Hi.
And I have, in one capacity or another, managed 2 Harborview Way, which is on the corner of Harborview Way and South Beach Streets. I understand that we're part of this area that's being impacted, and I'm not really clear on what's going on with that property.
All right. So let me ask staff to intervene here for a moment.
Sure.
And Andrew, if you would.
Okay. In this article, this particular Article 36, the property is included to be rezoned to residential designation. So if there is is this the property, can I just confirm the property is?
It's on the corner of Harborview Way and South Beach. It's
Okay.
2 Harborview Way.
So it's not included in this article at all?
Okay.
So it can be either commercial or residential?
It's included in the next article.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll get there. Go ahead.
It's included in the next article to stay residential or to go CN?
It's included in the next article to go to CN.
Okay, because it is a guest house. Okay.
Correct.
All right.
Okay. Hi, good evening.
Hi, I'm Jane Lane, 69 Easton Street, and we purchased the property in 2012. And we did it because there's a small cottage in the back, and it was our plan to put our home on the lot as our retirement home. And going from the LC that we were to the new commercial district you want to create, we would lose the ability to put a second dwelling on that house. If we stay in the R5, then if we move to the R5, then we would be able to put our home on that piece of property. So the other thing I just want to bring up, and I assumed you've already thought of that, but no one's talked about it, is the congestion between South Beach Street and North Water Street is horrendous in the summertime. It's very hard even to get out of the driveway. And why you would want to take that section and put more commercial there, I do not understand, because you do take your life into your hands backing out of your driveway. And we only have a car coming out of our residential lot a couple of times a day, but if it was commercial, this would go on, time after time, and more cars would be coming out onto that street and create a hazardous situation. And that's just a byproduct. To my initial feeling is that I just like to have my second house. Thank you.
Yeah,
Right.
he's going to do that for you right now, John.
Thank you.
I believe it's his property? Yes. Yep. So, and then, Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question through you?
You may, please.
So, then it's safe to say that you would support this article, which changes it to the R5 residential. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else in the audience? All right, board members. What would you like to do now?
Mr. Chairman, because the property is included in both, I would ask if you would recognize Mr. Kaiser.
Please, yeah, Pete, come on down, please. Good evening, sir.
Hello, everybody. Nice winter, huh? So anyway, I wasn't going to show up at this. I thought we had this figured out, but I guess I must have misunderstood one little part of it. And unfortunately, my wife's not here. She's with her mother. So we have a little bit of a situation that, 30 years ago, we built a few guest houses. My wife's run them, I've fixed them, and it's worked out well for us, for the community. Everything's been good. But my wife has let me know recently that she's about had it. So anyway, that may work out. We may get out of the business. Somebody may buy them, or somebody, as in the past, make them up and want to just make it into a house, a primary dwelling. So there are, each building is on their own piece of property. And so I found out just now that I guess the only other thing would be to, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, if we said, okay, make it R5, then at this point in time, that we would be able to continue, we're not going to close the doors, we would just continue to run the business as it is, non-conforming, I think as Leslie mentioned, and then have that option to, if we decide and everything goes right or wrong, whatever, but to get out of it, we could sell it and somebody could buy that and make it the primary residency. Is that?
That's correct.
So what they couldn't do, what this would be limiting us to, is if somebody, because they're in the commercial neighborhood, they couldn't change them from a guest house to a different business that is also sort of like what came first, the chicken or the egg here,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so if this zoning is changed, if you support this, so the back portion becomes, let me just show you where that is. It's this portion here. The commercial use continues as a grandfathered use. If you wish to change it to another commercial use, it would have to be of lower intensity and lower impact to the neighborhood. Okay, so it becomes a pre-existing non-conforming use, or there would be the residential options by right. In the next article, it would stay in commercial use, and you would need to do a subsequent zoning change to bring it to strictly residential.
So you'd have to go through a whole town meeting to get it.
Correct.
So, as I've just vented, I think what my wife and myself, what our wishes are futuristically, that this is the one that we should support?
That's, yes.
I think respectfully, if you want to keep...
I want to go home and have something thrown at me as I walk through the door,
We can talk about that, you and I, later.
All right.
If you want to, I guess it's a question of where does the future lie for you. If you want to make it...
Bring out the crystal ball, babe, come on.
If you want to make it residential, then this is the time to support this change. If you're thinking that when you're going to sell it, and staff chime in here at any time, if you're thinking when you want to sell it, you want to leave those commercial aspects open for the next potential seller, then I think we need to hear that so that we could move that into the next article and begin to deal with that. So it really is kind of how it's looking into your crystal ball and saying, what do we really want here?
Well,
and you have to realize as well, too, that
yeah.
whatever options are expressed, okay, and happen, there's always a future town meeting where you could go back in and have the zoning changed. You could decide, I really want to leave it commercial for now, so that if I do sell it, it leaves a wide option base, and then the person who picks it up later could say, that's nice, but I really did want to just make it residential once and for all and abolish those potential uses. But I'm just saying to you that it's an option that's there. It's an option. So, go ahead.
I would just as soon, I see what the issues are now, we talked about it earlier today, but I see more clearly what the issues are, but especially in your situation.
Yeah, and I can't weigh in on this totally because, of course, my wife is,
Right.
she's my partner, so.
What I want to do, I don't think we should close either one of these.
Right.
So we need to leave these open and go to March 6th, so we can
Right, okay.
figure out, I know she wants one thing, you want something else, but if you went to the guest house and you stayed with the CN and you wanted to turn it into a dwelling, that's not possible. The buyer would have to wait a year, they'd have to count on going back to town
Yeah, we
meeting,
don't
la, la, la,
agree
la.
with that.
So that's an issue.
Yeah, definitely.
That's why LC was
definitely.
there, but that's an issue. And I know we want to get rid of LC, it's kind of a ridiculous zone. It's the only place on the island it was. But I think we need to maybe talk some more
Yeah, definitely.
about that.
I agree with you.
Okay, so you going to have another meeting on this stuff?
I think where we're
March
going to
6th.
track to with
March
this,
6th.
and what I'm kind of hearing from one or two of my board members is that we won't close the public hearing. We're going to continue this out into March 6th.
Yep.
But I'd probably say for any of you, if you have any questions that come up, board members are very approachable. I'd respectfully ask that you probably start with staff and talk to them, and they can sit down and really kind of, in a very neutral environment, work through the entire process with you and have you come to an understanding of exactly what is and what isn't permissible under those changes.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate your time.
No problem. Let me
Mr.
just-
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Andrew, did you have some thoughts?
Before you end, I'd like to just...
Oh, I'm not going to end,
Okay.
because we're still in public hearing phase.
Okay.
I just wanted to see if anyone, yeah.
I'm just not understanding this, I'm sorry, I have to ask the same question again. Are you actually saying that that this commercial zoning would be against private houses? Like, those would be not part of the
No, you wouldn't
zoning?
be able to build a second dwelling.
But if you wanted to convert
primary
a
use.
guest house to a private home, that's okay?
Yes.
All right.
Not in CN.
In this
Let
article,
me go to staff.
This article.
Let me go to
this
staff.
article, R5 is a residential zone. LC is a CN does not allow
Does not allow...
single-family houses.
So
As a
you...
primary use.
As a primary use. It allows it as accessory to a commercial use.
Thank you.
So that's where the conflict is occurring.
Okay. Anyone else in the audience want to comment on this? We are still on
Or
Article
both.
We're on both, Gary.
Because he's concerned about one versus the other
I know,
also.
I know.
We're really on both.
I know, we'll get...
36 and 37.
Well, no, we're on Article 36. Do not confuse the
Technically.
fact we have not opened
Technically,
Article
we are
37,
there.
please. I understand what you're saying. You're partially right, because they will blend into each other, but right now, we are technically on Article 36 only. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before we leave this,
Yes,
I
sir.
just, in terms of these particular areas, we have not received any opposition to at least this group here.
Yep.
Oh, that group, okay.
There were mixed opinions in this group here. So before we go on to 37, I just want you to understand
Yeah.
what's happening. Okay?
Because the existing use is so much different in those other
Right.
places.
Anyone else in the audience
Some
want to
guest
comment on
houses in
Article
there.
36? Board members, what's your pleasure at this
Make a
point?
motion to continue Article 36 for review to March 6th.
Okay, and do I hear a second? Motion's now made and seconded. For discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. That now brings us to Article 37, which is zoning map change from RC and LC to CN for portions of Brant Point as recommended in the Brant Point Area Plan. Properties included in this article are located off of Eastern Street, Harborview Way, McKay Way, North Beach Street, South Beach Street, and C Street. Andrew or Leslie, please.
Next slide.
Didn't leave out North Water Street, which I think is in this article, or half of North West Street. Because we're not planning anywhere else.
It is down there.
Another half of North Water and 38.
Let me just check with staff here.
In the ad versus the,
In the original document, you had 23 North Water in Article, I believe, 37, and 13 North Water in Article 38.
we have to answer it.
I'm just giving staff a minute to verify information, so thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
article was advertised properly. There's just a discrepancy between the agenda and the legal notification.
Thank you. So hopefully that clarifies that. Staff?
Mr. Chairman, on the map behind you is the proposed changes from LC, a commercial district, and RC to CN. There's actually a second map that deals with the RC. The properties include basically the main intersection here at Easton, and includes the beach side, includes existing commercial businesses located here. As you know, there's the overlap, so we've included both properties that are located here on McKay. It does include the guest house here at the corner, so that's always been included in the CN district, commercial neighborhood, and ends at C Street. So these properties are currently in a commercial district now, limited commercial, and are proposed to go to commercial neighborhood. The next map, Catherine, if you could just touch on that, is, I'm sorry, if we could go back. Do we have the map with the RC? Oh, I'm sorry. The RC portion, excuse me, is the White Elephant property here, which is located in RC.
Okay.
Okay?
Good. Go ahead, Linda.
There are some, just remembered, there are some single-family dwellings on Mackey Way,
Yes, there is.
and little ones towards the end. They're not all involved with what used to be the tortoise lot, which is where White Elephant is, with their cottages. As you go down Mackey Way, those little ones to the right, there are some private dwellings back in there, and they would, again, run into the same problem. Dwellings are not a primary use as for CN, so they're spread out in there, but they're lined up down Mackey Way.
of these two?
They're in, I'd have to look at them again. I know them if I see them, but there's 2 or 3 of them in there.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask, I know Ms. Williams was on the Brent Point area plan.
Correct.
Was this specifically discussed?
We didn't really talk about this area going to commercial other than the white elephant parts. So it wasn't anything that was in the forefront of what we discussed at the time, because we knew that there were private dwellings down Mackey Way. And that's how you pronounce it in the old days. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it was never McKay, it was Mackey, way back.
Mackay Way. Mr. Chairman and the board, I just would like to say that the properties on Harborview Way, the back of those properties are on Mackay Way. There's a little cottage as you're going down Mackay Way, and then following that would be the White Elephant cottages. So those, it's basically the back of the properties that are on Harborview.
Thank you. Board members, was there anything else? Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, would anyone like to comment? Dr. Butterworth. Good evening, sir.
I want to say, first of all, that I know the board is committed to getting rid of the limited commercial zone, but I just want to say that I've lived on North Water Street for 34 years, and the limited commercial zone has been a very good thing for North Water Street. This has been a very stable neighborhood. There's not one building on North Water Street which is more commercially used now than it was 34 years ago when I moved there. It's helped maintain a very delicate balance between very light commercial activity, which is guest houses and private homes. And now, in getting rid of the limited commercial zone, which I realize you're apparently obligated to do, is pushing the neighborhood in 2 entirely different directions. Our half of the street is proposed to have a drastic cutback in the density that we're allowed. The first half of the street is going to be thrown wide open to development. That's coming up in 38. The zone that's proposed for our house to enter into has nothing to do with the existing neighborhood. These are 200-year-old houses on 5,000 square foot lots. They're not even close to 7,500. They're private homes, and they don't meet the minimum setback, which is predicted for this zone. If you look at it, what do they look like? They look like the other side of the street. They look like residential, old, historic. But as they do this, they're talking about 40% coverage instead of 50% coverage, while the first half of the street is going from the same zone that we're in now, which is 50% to 75%, no setbacks, no limitations, no parking, no nothing. Whereas we're being told that we better not try to put a shed in our backyard. It has to be 10 feet back from the set line, which is no other property in the neighborhood has to meet that requirement. No other property is at only 40%. And this is stable. There's 4 houses there that are all ancient. One is tottering back and forth between being a guest house and being a private home. It's gone back and forth twice in recent years. There's our private home, there's the private home next to us, and the 2 guest houses are basically, very similar architecturally and size of lots and all of that. And I think it's a real negative to put us into this commercial zone where I only found out tonight that private homes are not allowed. They have to be an accessory use. So we're being made non-compliant as to minimum lot size. We're being made non-compliant in terms of setback from the street because we're too close to the street. We're being non-conforming into our use because they're private homes, and private homes are being absolutely discouraged from this zone. And I just think we're being thrown into this because we abut a major hotel that has a lot of space, and they're trying to control that. I also say the sideline setback only hits the little people in our block. If you own all the way through the block, which Nantucket Island Hotels does, they don't have any side lot, back lot lines to deal with. They go all the way through the block from North Water to South Beach Street, from Easton to C Street. We don't. We go to the back end of our lot and we stop. And the difference between having to be 5 foot in and being 10 foot in when you live on 5,000 square foot and you want to put a tool shed or a workshop on your property is significant. We're also being told, apparently, that you can't have a small cottage in your backyard because that's not going to be an allowed use in this zone. I mean, if you go down the street and look, what do we look like? Do we look like the stuff to the water side of us? No. What we look like is the other side of the street, which is residential, old, historic. And I know there's a big push to get rid of the limited commercial, And it's under time pressure, you want to get rid of it as soon as you can, but I would just say I think it's more important to do it right than to do it quickly. And I just think we have nothing in common with the description of these lots that you have for this zone, the commercial neighborhood. It's nothing like what our house is or our neighbors' houses are. And I will say, it's amazing how stable this neighborhood has been, the entire street, until the very first part of the street got rezoned 2 years ago, and that's the first major change and an ominous one for the street. We'll get to that in 38. But, I've lived there all this time. The only change that's been is from one property being commercial to going residential, and that's number 13. Everything else, every guest house that's there now was there when we were there, and the guest houses are a very compatible use. Nobody minds being next to a guest house. But being next, we're told now that you can have small restaurants in our zone. Maybe we could before, but no one did it in the limited commercial. My understanding was the limited commercial made that difficult, that you basically approved for a guest house if you wanted to get it, but a lot of other things were banned. But I would like to see my section of the street, on our side of the street, get the same zoning as the other side of the street, which is residential old historic, which I think is entirely appropriate to what the size of the lots are, what the setback is, and what the architecture is. And I also wanted to say, both in this article and the other one, is that I was disappointed to hear it continued to March 6th. Our daughter is due in Utah. We're not going to be here, and these two articles, 37 and 38, are going to have a dramatic, and I mean dramatic, effect on our neighborhood. And I'll be back to talk on 38.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the audience like to comment on this? Please, and Mr. Angelostro, I'll get you next.
Todd Booth, I live on 80 Easton Street, and I have a lot of the same concerns as the gentleman that just spoke. This zoning change will completely change the character of Easton Street. Shops, restaurants, bars. This is something that, the area right now is mainly either private homes or offices or lodging. And I don't know if you've addressed the parking issues that are going to result as part of this change. Right now, the parking situation on Eastern Street is a nightmare during the summer. It basically is no on-street parking. At night, people use the parking there because it's the closest they can get into town to go to shops and restaurants downtown. People coming back to their cars at 1 o'clock in the morning. The noise, we can't even sleep in our front bedrooms anymore with the windows open during the summer because of all the traffic and the noise. I just think that this zoning really favors the existing commercial properties that are there, essentially the White Elephant Hotel, which allows them to convert lodging into shops and restaurants and things like that. And again, I think it's really destroying the character of the neighborhood of Easton Street. And I don't know if you're going to be looking at this again, if this area you'll be looking at again at some other time. Would this be part of the March 6th?
I have yet to check in with my board members, but I have an idea that this is going to get continued to March 6th.
Okay.
Yeah, could you do me, just one of my board members, could you spell your last name for me, please?
Booth, B-O-O-T-H.
There you go, thank you.
80 Easton. Yeah.
There you go. Mr. Vorse?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question through
Please.
you? Then on the prior article, Catherine, could you put that slide up? So if this property was left in a residential zone, is that the concern, or is it for the other area outside as well? So if your property were included in Article 36 with the other group of residential homes that we talked about, sorry.
Oops.
Press the wrong button.
No.
Sorry about that.
To either computer 1 or computer 2. It's not 1, try 2. There you go.
There we go, sorry. Is this your property?
It's further down the street. It's about 3 houses down from
The exit?
intersection, right around there.
Okay. So if this group with the other property or properties were put in the R5, does that address your concern?
I'm not exactly sure what's the option between the R5 and where
The R5 is a residential zone, so it would prioritize, it would not have an allowance for commercial uses. It would allow single-family, second dwellings.
Yes, that would be where I think the house should be.
And
I'm just asking, Mr. Chairman, so when we look at bringing a revised proposal, that would be something we could look at.
Right, and I think I'm kind of hearing the board will want to continue this, so what I might say is between now and March 6th, it respectfully would probably be a really good idea to sit down and chat with staff a little bit, and they can break down the parameters for you and get you, done. Come to at least a common understanding of what's happening.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Hang on just for a second. Mr. Angelostro, and then Kim, I'm going to come to you next.
Catherine, would you advance the slide, please?
Thank you.
Michael Angelostro.
Is it in relation to the conversation that was just had?
What I wanted to say is if there's any chance that I could hear any feedback from the board about what I have to say about it.
I think right now we're just taking in, we want to hear what people have to say first. You'll hear from us. But I think we want to hear, I really do think my board members want to hear what you got to say. So I think it would just be a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction just to give you feedback right this second. So let's hear what other people are going to say, okay? Thank you. Mr. Angelostro, good evening.
Thank you. Michael Angelostro. I have a more or less technical question.
Yes, sir.
In the CN zone, which prohibits single-family homes as a primary use, when these conversions are made from whatever to CN, if that single-family home wants to put an addition on, do they have to go to the Board of Appeals for a special permit? Okay, so that is to me, sitting on the Board of Appeals, that's going to be a huge increase in what we're going to be seeing. Not only down here, but a lot of the areas that have already been changed, they were primarily residential, specifically across the street from the high school. So I'm not sure that, I understand what you did by trying to get rid of the single-family dwelling as a primary use, but I don't know if it can be modified so that if it was an existing single-family dwelling, that it doesn't need, it's going to be a mess. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi again. I'd just like to...
if you got to identify yourself.
Oh, sorry. Kimberly Taylor.
Thank you.
76 Easton Street.
Thank you.
I've been here before, parking. I understand what Dr. Butterworth is saying about the lovely North Water Street, but this little area on Easton Street, I already am a commercial, residential, but my understanding now, which I didn't understand, is you take away my complete ability to put a cottage in on my 12,000-foot lot where I do have a garage. It's the first house abutting the Harbor House. 3 of the 5 houses already have living cottages in the back, and you have 2 more residents that are not in attendance tonight on the street. 84, it would be myself, Todd, and number 84, in the Bloomfields at 78. So this is impacting in a mixed way all of us in so many different directions. So now I'm a commercial, I'm completely residential. I've lived there for 35 years. And I am completely confused now. So is that, are now we now in the same arena as the C Street home that can't have the second dwelling, which is a lovely lot back there. I'm familiar with the little lot they have. And the next thing is, I feel that this push is for the Harbor House. When we researched what could and potentially be put in here, is massive. It can be a bakery. It can be a 70-seat, well, with permitting, 70-seat restaurant. We still haven't addressed the parking, which is extraordinarily dangerous down there. And this really is just going to be the immediate benefit of the Harbor House, which is going to come in very swiftly and put many businesses in there with once again, the cones will go out, and the cars won't move that are in residence on the big building on the corner. So please, if there's any way, just one more person saying, take another look at this, because it's such a mixed bag. The one house that you were talking about earlier, private house, is 8 South Beach. There's 2 condos behind it on McKay Way. Those were the residences. Other than that, the 3 on our street, my mixed use, and we are just all now very confused over how and everybody's being impacted differently. I have 12,000 square foot, should be able to get a guest house. I now have a pool, but can't put a pool in my backyard because there's no more pools that I can put in. The whole rear of my yard is now impacted with the worst industrial use you could possibly ever have. And years ago, Derek Ragavine said, what do you want, a parking lot next door to you? I said, yeah, I do. Because I knew I wouldn't have to look in somebody's bed as I walked out my living room door. So this has impacted the residences. And just remember, it's just little people with our little houses that still do live there. And we're terrified with what's coming. The usage of these commercial buildings could be anything, and that's the way it reads. I was told everything but a crematorium and a 200-seat. I'm not joking. It's in the town Massachusetts law. The crematorium and a 200-seat restaurant would have to be applied for. So this is massive, and it changes our little homes dramatically, whether they're partially used as commercial or whatnot. And I just agree with just the look at this further, because I believe it's the Harbor House coming in for something massive that the area is just not ready for yet, without it really being laid out point by point for us. And I thank you for your time. I know many people.
I think staff would like to comment for a second, Andrew.
Mr. Chairman, I think, we included a different option for this area to include a residential version as well. So we did include that. And, I wish I had known earlier about extending ROH, which I think is a perfectly good approach for that section of the street. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that came up at the area plan discussions. I believe Mrs. Butterworth was on that committee. I don't know if, through you, could I
go
ask?
ahead, yeah, please, go ahead.
I was on the Brant Point Committee, but I always felt like I was misplaced there because we're in this little historic district at the end of North Water Street. North Ave is in it, Easton. We have this little tiny historic neighborhood that's so not the Brant Point area. Yeah. It's really, we really belong with the people across the street. That's all.
But does that answer your question, Andrew?
It does.
Okay.
It does. Right. And, Mr. Chairman, just again, you've heard a lot about restaurants. The LC district allows restaurants by special permit. The CN district allows it by special permit. So there's some commercial uses that are similar. There's no question there's an expansion of the commercial uses. But, make no mistake about it, the LC district allows a host of commercial uses that haven't been established yet. And if the intent is to maintain more residential, that's great. We can always go back and think about that and, take some time. Mm-hmm. It's just, we will have to, the intent is, if we have districts that allow everything, why bother? Mm-hmm. If every commercial district allows it to be overrun by single-family houses who normally don't want other commercial uses next to it, then we'll eventually lose all of the commercial districts. The point of the master plan that we spent a lot of time discussing is to develop distinct areas. Mm-hmm. So I think it's fine for us to take some additional time here, but I don't think we should lose sight that that was the intent of the master plan and the current zoning, which allows everything to be interspersed, does not serve the planning board well, doesn't serve the community well.
No, I agree with that. I don't think it serves the community well at all. And I think that what I'm going to do is, just listening to some of the audience members, I really do believe that in short order, they should be contacting you guys to really, I think, kind of understand some of the more dynamics that you're raising here. Because I think you're bringing up some excellent issues, and, what we're trying to do a lot of times is recognize a neighborhood for truly what it's become.
It's what it is, not what it's become.
Well, what I'm saying to you is from where the zoning was to what it could have turned into, neighborhoods have kind of evolved on their own. They really have. And so, well, all right, never mind. All right.
This is unusual.
All right, let me go to the rest of the public at this point and see if anyone else wants to comment, because I thought I saw 2 or 3 raised hands. Mr. Reed? Good evening.
Good evening. I have a client who owns property at 2 North Beach Street, and since this is pretty clearly going over to the March 6th meeting, I hadn't really intended to say anything more about it at this point. But I would like to suggest that there have been a lot of very good points made during the discussion of this tonight, both by Dr. Butterworth about his neighborhood, and I was thinking myself while he was describing it that, that would sort of call out for that area to be in ROH. And as far as the very good point that Mr. Angelastro made about the not only the burden that it's going to be on the Board of Appeals, but the burden on property owners in the area, it may very well be that there should be some language put in, and I think it would probably be outside the scope of this article, that would enable existing single-family dwellings that would be grandfathered to make alterations that don't create new dimensional nonconformities without having to go to the Board of Appeals as a result. And probably a few further tweaks on that concept as well. I'm just wondering if at this stage of the game, admittedly it's going over to March 6th for discussion of these articles, but I think that there are some things that would be outside the scope, including the change to ROH and the thing that Mr. Angelastro was talking about, that perhaps the best way to deal with this would be to not go forward with these articles at this town meeting. Not to say that they shouldn't, that the whole area shouldn't be cleaned up in the very near future, but to have some more thought given to this and some more input so that it could be handled at, next year's or the next special town meeting or whatever would come up in a way that would be, that would cover all these concerns that can't really be handled without going outside the scope of the article.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew, please.
Mr. Chairman, I think that we could support some of that. I don't think it has to be an all or nothing proposition. Where there are areas that don't present these problems, again, we committed to a schedule, and I think that we should proceed where there aren't issues. Areas that may need more study, I'm completely in favor of that. Right. I don't think, though, that where there are areas of concern should impact areas where they're not.
Right.
And I think we could be able to report on that for you at the March 6th meeting.
And I agree with that. I think, staff needs some time to look at this in a slightly different light and triage what can happen, and then have a full-fledged discussion back one more time to see exactly how it's going to shake out. Is this in relation to where we're at right now? Go ahead.
I think the beauty of the LC, and it was put in there for a very specific reason, because the beachside predates zoning. There's all those guest houses predated zoning. I think the beauty of the LC, though, it does have to go away for something else. But the beauty of the LC was that it allowed the guest houses next to the residences. The White Elephant had been there for 100 years. I mean, it's sort of Brant Point, and we painfully learned that when we did the area plan in Brant Point, that I was the chairman of that one. And it's a very unique, very tricky basically self-contained area that developed unlike any other area on Nantucket at all. And that's actually in the preliminary statement of the plan. And I think nothing is more clear than this discussion we've had tonight of just how unique and difficult Brant Point actually is to rezone, where we can rezone whole areas elsewhere. This may present with some problems, but I do support what staff said, that the next couple of articles are standalones, a little different than these two, which is trying to figure out how to deal with the residences and deal with the commercials, which are 90% of them are guest houses or transient residentially related, except for Al Silva's old property. So it is tricky, and I appreciate that. So I do think we should maybe not do 36 and 37, but we have time to figure that out by March 6th. And talk about 38 and 39 on their own. So I think there's some merit in those.
But we are on Article 37 only, so let me see if anyone else in the audience wants to comment on this.
I'll make a motion to put Article 37 over to March 6th for further review.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion.
For discussion.
Yes, for discussion, sir.
Make sure that the Butterworths are satisfied because they can't be here for the next meeting. When are you leaving? The 6th. Oh, the 6th of March? Well, then you got plenty of time to talk to staff. Well, that's all, you gotta go. Barge right in. Okay?
This is their first child. It'll be 2 weeks late anyway.
Okay. And that, now,
All right.
vote.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Article 38. Thank you. Article 38 is a zoning map change from RC and LC to CDT for properties located off of North Water and C Streets, Harborview Way, South Beach Street, Steamboat Wharf, Commercial Street, and Washington Street. Andrew, Leslie?
Mr. Chairman, on the map behind you, you can see this includes properties that are outside the CDT. So this extends the CDT to C Street. We had received a request from owners in this particular block to advance an article. So it's here for your consideration. The CDT was first established in 2009 and includes a very distinct core area of the downtown.
Thank you. Board members?
2003.
I'm
2003, I guess, was the original date. How time flies.
Thank you. Yeah, anyone in the public like to comment on this? All right, thank you.
My name is Malcolm McNabb. I live at 13 North Water, at the corner of North Water and C Street. I'm on the same side as Dr. Butterworth, but a little farther down. I would just, if I could record what Dr. Butterworth said, I would repeat the same thing. It's not a commercial area, it's an historic area. You should go walk down that street sometime. It's absolutely wonderful, and it does not need to be commercial. I mean, you've got a line of commercial LC at some point on North Water. I don't see why it has to move up. And the same arguments about the historic nature of my side of the street, down at that part of the street, I think is the same as Dr. Butterworth's.
You're already commercial.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm LC. I'm the same as,
That's limited commercial, that is commercial. Guest houses.
well, yeah, it's the same as Dr. Butterworth's side of the street, farther up.
Is this it? Is this the property here?
This house on the corner.
That's my house right there.
Right.
But all the way up is limited commercial. So I don't see why we just leave the commercial, limited commercial where it is. Because my part of the street looks like Dr. Butterworth's part of the street. Victorian house, built in 1870.
We all set?
CDT has a certain.
Is there some, all right, guys, if you're going to talk, let's talk to the audience as well, too. All right, I'm sorry.
That's all right. No, I just.
No, okay.
I'm just,
Was it-
my point is that whatever you do on the upper part of North Water, there's no reason not to continue it down to my house.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate it. You got it. Dr.
I'll tell you, even though this is not where my house is, I'm more concerned about Article 38 than I am about the one in my own house. This is just a dramatic change in the neighborhood. I missed when 5 North Beach Street and 5 North Water Street got rezoned last year, and the impact was immediate. We suddenly had an outdoor theater in a tent. That property can be developed to 75% ground cover. No parking is any longer required. There's no longer any side yard setbacks on that, and now the proposal is to march this all the way down to C Street. And, you know, the rezoning of the first house on the street was sort of like the camel sticking his nose under the tent. This is like the camel trampling the tent. This is just wiping out half of North Water Street on one side, and then it's a domino effect. So 5 North Water got rezoned, so everyone's saying, hey, you know, we're right next to that, we want to rezone too. And for the people who currently own those properties, if they're not planning on living in them, if they have a guest house, if they're looking for a one-time financial windfall, they will get it because their property is going to be much more saleable at a higher price because it's full-out commercial. But this is going to permanently affect this neighborhood. And then you've got the domino effect, so when they rezoned just only 2 years ago, they took out half the block there. Now this half the block is threatening to go. Then you've got the people right across the street saying, geez, we're stuck in residential old historic, but we're looking at all this commercial stuff right across North Water Street. We're being penalized. We should be able to do this, or we want to get out of the neighborhood because we're now looking at restaurants. I mean, we're talking about making North Water Street look like Broad Street, where every other building is a restaurant. We just went through the thing and got the help from the planning board a couple of years ago when the White Elephant was redoing everything, that we were finally not going to have delivery trucks coming to a restaurant on North Water Street and parking in the street and blocking up the street. Unlike a lot of streets down like Broad Street or Main Street or Federal Street, there's not 2 traffic lanes. There's 1 traffic lane. It's the road that the NERDA bus takes to go to Nantucket. It's a heavily used road. And if you allow these properties to go to 75% coverage, no position for off-street parking, no requirement that they have off-street loading, their trucks would have to park on the street when they're unloading. They'll completely block the street. Those properties that are being switched over right now, they provide about 13-plus off-street parking spaces, which would no longer be required, even though they'd be allowed. I mean, the Brass Lantern could put a whole other house in there. The Inn on C Street could put a whole other building in there if they wiped out their parking. So you're eliminating the parking, you're creating more demand for parking. In addition to all that parking being lost that's not on the street, if those places are going to be serviced, then we're going to have take out parking on North Water Street to these loaning zones where they'll say, can't park here between 8 and 12 because we need this space to service all these highly commercial properties that we've just allowed to come halfway down North Water Street. I mean, this is a forever, you can't go back change to this neighborhood. This street has been incredibly stable for the 34 years I've lived there. There's not one property on that street that's more heavily used than it used to be. We've made some advances in how the Harbor House property, now to become the White Elephant, is used. When you folks required that they no longer get any deliveries on the North Water Street side, that they're going to have to access it from the backside. These properties are not big enough to provide any access from the backside. You know, when you open that up and say we're going to have that in the same zone as Broad Street or Main Street, we're talking about, you know, restaurants, we're talking about possible outside music, all of that. And it's going to be smack dab across from residential old historic on the other side of the street. And when it goes all the way down to C Street, smack dab across from, hopefully, residential old historic for the second half of North Water Street. It just would be very sad to see this happen in the street. And I can tell you, I appreciate every night in the summer how far I am away from the Rose and Crown and how far away I am from the Brotherhood with outdoor live music. And when you guys have this commercial zone, you say, you know, we need nightlife on Nantucket. It's not fair to not have these restaurants have light music and be open till pretty late. And so we've allowed the Brotherhood to have music. We've allowed the movie theater, which the little one that I love. but I wouldn't want to live right next door to them, and we're bringing this way down a residential street, and it's got no more zoning restrictions than the heart of downtown if you bring it all the way down here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the audience want to comment on this? Please, hi.
Mickey Rowland, I don't see the chart, the map for the commercial street area. Is that still part of this article?
It is. We just haven't got to that discussion yet. It's coming up.
Okay, should I wait?
Yes, because there's a mistake on the map, so. Oh.
Hi.
My name is Matthew Parker. I own 5 and 7 C Street. I did sign on to a couple of other guest house owners on North Water Street who proposed this. I thought it was certainly appropriate to extend CDT to complete the block bound by Whalers Lane, South Beach Street, North Water Street, and C Street. I've learned a few things tonight. One is that currently this is LC, and if a restaurant wanted to open up in an LC district, that is possible according to the current zoning. I guess my question is the distinction other than ground cover of a restaurant, because clearly I do not want a full-scale restaurant going in right next door to me. That's, to me, is certainly not compatible, or a nightclub, obviously, with lodging. And this area of the island, C Street, North Water Street, is probably 85% lodging and residential. At the same time, I would like to see this area allow for a possible expansion of lodging. In other words, if I wanted to expand my property, add a couple of guest rooms, or if a neighbor, a current lodging house, wanted to modify the lodging intensity, I would like to see that be a possibility. CDT, I think, would allow for that, whereas LC would not allow for that to the same extent. So this was my logic for supporting the extension of CDT to include C Street and that section of North Water Street. So I'm in support of this. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience? Yes. Hold on. I'll be with you in a second, sir.
Good evening. My name is Sarah O'Reilly. I own 7 and 9 North Water Street, and I also told Michelle Langes, who owns the Brass Lantern, that we would appreciate you considering this. We did sign up for the petition to go to the CDT, and it's because of our lodging that we wanted to increase, and we're not looking to put in restaurants or anything like that. And I just thought it was appropriate, seeing how everything seems to be changing there a little bit, but I don't think our 3 properties there would change dramatically. I mean, we are historic buildings, and we would definitely keep the look that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on. There was another gentleman who had us. Sir?
My name is Rick Storer. I live at 24 North Water Street. I'll make this very quick. I'd just like to echo Dr. Butterworth's comments. We live across the street from him, and I couldn't be any more eloquent than he was, so thank you.
Thank you. Briefly. Sir?
Yeah, I just want to follow up, the current owners may want to just expand their guest houses, but once this happens, there's no control over what happens there. You can develop it just as commercially as Broad Street. The Brotherhood is in a historic 1840 building, but that didn't mean that they can't be a full-out restaurant with stacks turning out hamburgers that you can smell all the way to my house and a large outdoor entertainment area there. Once the cat is out of the bag, once this happens, the current owners can't control what happens in the future. You know, they may have well intentions, they may just want to expand their guest houses a little bit. I love the guest houses being there. But I think there'll be a great temptation as other properties are scooped up. Where can we stick a restaurant? And these places are going to look very appealing for sticking a restaurant in there. And once we've done this, once we've taken away this restriction, and that 75% ground cover, and that no setbacks from the property line on the sides, is just opening this wide up to any kind of development in the future.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience?
Could guest houses be expanded under other zonings than this commercial zoning? Are there other ways that that's allowable?
Let me, staff.
Yes.
Please.
Not at this particular town meeting, but again, if we took some time, maybe some alternative could be introduced. Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead.
During the first 30 years of zoning, most of those guest houses did have special permits already issued for them. Whether it's expanding a bedroom here and there, or not having parking, or doing something else, because the ZBA is full of special permits because they are non-conforming as to ground cover or setbacks or something. So that relief is and was available under LC. And while LC exists, it's still available. If it was changed to something else, it would still be grandfathered, Andrew, under something, and could still come back in under 33A, which is pre-existing non-conforming structures or lots. So most of those guest houses have ZBA approvals on them up and down that street and down C Street.
The only zone that, as you wipe out the limited commercial zone, the only zone that offers similar zoning in terms of intensity is the old historic, which is the 5,000 square foot lot, the 5-foot setbacks, the 5-foot setbacks from the back, the 50% ground cover. If that were extended all the way down the street, is there a way to make it, even though it's residential old historic, can these pre-existing, I would like to see it so the pre-existing guest houses would be protected. They could expand even though they're in the residential old historic, because that's the zone I'd like to see all the way down the street. This would really keep the street what it is, which is a place where people sleep. Once you go beyond 5 North Beach Street, every single thing that you come to is a place for people to sleep, other than the Harbor House restaurant, which has been closed for 6 years. Everything else is either a private home, a quiet guest house, or the one hotel on the street. There's no other commercial activity on the entire street once you leave the couple of offices that are which are already in the CDT. The couple of offices on the left when you first start down the street, and the 5 North Water Street, which is the theater, artists, et cetera, et cetera. The whole rest of the street is purely for sleeping.
Mr. Chairman, I'm thinking maybe something, if it were zoned to ROH, for example,
right,
there might be a way to do some sort of an allowance for properties abutting the commercial downtown, or some within some distance, to make an allowance for the guest houses. So I think there's some ideas that we could look at. So, right. Yep.
Center Street is ROH, and a section up where the carriage house is, at 76 Main, Anchor Inn, they all have special permits on them. One now because the planning board has got bigger, but they all have special permits on them, and they're all in the ROH, and they're pre-existing non-conforming, and they've been allowed to expand and alter their uses by 139, 33A, pre-existing non-conforming uses. So they haven't been zoned out. They've just had to come in and get a special permit to reorganize themselves or add Ann's apartment or something. So it's not out of the question. To me, ROH might work because it still protects their use. It just doesn't allow new guest houses.
Yeah.
But almost all of the B&Bs are on that side of town that are left.
Mr. Parker.
Just as a point of clarification, I know it was discussed earlier with Pete Kaiser, but regarding CDT, would that also preclude a guest house from becoming a primary residence?
Andrew, Leslie?
Hold on.
I mean, I thought I heard earlier that that would be the case in the conversion from, I think it was RC to CN. Would LC to CDT preclude a guest house from becoming a primary residence?
Yes.
It would?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, hang on for a second.
Yeah, I'm not sure how comfortable I am with that. I mean, I want to have, I want to have the option. I think the other B&Bs and guest houses that have supported the extension of CDT to complete that block, we want to be able to have the ability to possibly modify and slightly expand our existing businesses, and yet I think we do not want to, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, I would not want to preclude by this zoning change my guest house being purchased at some point in the future by someone who wants to live there. So,
briefly.
I have to second that. What Matt said, the lodging establishments have lost over 1,100 rooms in the last 12 to 15 years because a substantial portion of the B&Bs have been sold in the ROH, and they've been all converted into single-family dwellings. India House, there's a whole bunch of them that have had that happen. And I don't foresee that trend stopping. So a lot of these B&Bs are in historic structures that were single-family dwellings to begin with and were converted subsequently to guest houses and could be purchased to put it back into a single-family dwelling, as a substantial, probably 50% of them have been. And I think if CDT, we need to think about that, if CDT precludes that becoming a single-family dwelling, that would be a big concern. I've been concerned about not allowing primary uses as single-family dwellings, but it could be, Andrew, that if they were converted into single-family dwellings, if they were in CDT, that couldn't be allowed under 33A. It'd be a use variance, which is something the planning board and the ZBA doesn't, since 1979 or something, have any right to grant. So they wouldn't be able to, unless they went back to town meeting, change the zoning back, just because they have a sale. And that is a mumbo-jumbo that takes over a year's worth of time, then they have to wait. It's just not worth it. So we have to figure out exactly how we want to deal with this, and I think maybe ROH might be the best way to go, because it protects the ones that are there. It protects the residences up and down the street, and it really doesn't change much because everybody up and down Center Street and Main Street is already in ROH, and they're all functioning guest houses that have had special permits to expand.
Mr. McLaughlin?
And you can make it.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry.
That's a
Yeah.
committee use.
For the years I've been on this board, I always have to keep a backward policy of my own, that when there's a problem or something, an article for changes or something, I always listen to the neighbors. They have to live with it. I don't. I'm somewhere else. And I have a question on this change here that they're requesting. 4 people that live in the area, Dr. McNabb, Dr. Butterworth, Mr. Storer, and Mr. Parker. I have one question to you. Are you in favor of this article as it is, or are you opposed to it? Could you answer that?
As it is, I'm opposed to it.
I'm sorry?
I'm opposed to it.
Opposed.
But I think we could find a solution to
I
make
think-
everybody happy.
I'm happy to see the guest houses do well, and I love having guest houses. I think it's totally
Yeah.
valuable, but I don't mind if they expand some. But I don't want to see a restaurant or a commercial kitchen turning out fumes and the elimination of any parking requirement. Right now, Matt's place provides off-street.
Can you come up to the microphone? He's having a little problem hearing. I'm so sorry.
Right now, Matt Parker's guest house provides some off-street parking. The Brass Lantern provides considerable off-street parking. And, if it saved them being a guest house, I would suck it up with losing a little of the off-street parking to give them a variance. But I don't want to see this go to all-out commercial. I just think this is just we haven't expanded the commercial zone this far in any other direction. I mean, this is like marching 2 blocks out Orange, or 2 blocks out Union, or going up Main Street, or India, or Hussey, or Center. We're not doing that, and I love the street, and I hate to see it happen to the street.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else in the audience want to comment on this? All right.
I just wanted to say that I would second what Matt said and Linda said about the guest house to private house, not...
No, they've lost many.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. There's a second part to this article, but maybe, which could be deferred as well if that's the general direction of the board.
I'm going to get that sense in a minute, but I'm kind of picking up that's kind of the direction the board may want to head at this juncture.
Well, no, there's some stuff that should go to CDT, like the old Steamboat Wharf commercial.
Yes.
Washington, some parts of that are already commercial. There are some parts, he doesn't have them all up there because they're on different
Okay,
maps.
Catherine, next slide, please.
So there are parts of this other than this particular area that really need to be discussed.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the RC portion. So this is currently RC properties. The map is incorrect because it included this property here. So that has been deleted from the article and is not included in the current version. The Harborview Place is included in the article. Steamboat Wharf, Yacht Club property. So this is in a different district. It's not in LC, it's in RC.
Yep.
So
please.
These are all waterfront properties. Mine was just eliminated. I was included earlier, but Andrew took my piece off this map.
Talk into it more because he can't hear you.
But I still think it's a mistake to include any waterfront properties into a CDT zone because there's 0 side yard setbacks in the CDT zone, and I don't think any of us wants to see wall-to-wall buildings blocking our view of the harbor anywhere across the waterfront. Thank you.
Yeah, but that's...
I know we've talked earlier, Andrew, about removing some of these, or maybe just removing Commercial Wharf for now, until we figure out what we're doing with the electric company.
Right.
But I think the part of this warrant article proposal that I think is kind of important to keep going with is Steamboat Wharf and the Yacht Club. So I do support Steamboat Wharf and the Yacht Club being added to the purple. But I think we should leave Commercial Wharf out of it for now and just do what we really need to do down on that part.
Okay. Was there anything else, Andrew?
that's it on this article.
All right. Anyone else in the audience? Pleasure of the board.
I'll make a motion that we continue for the 6 cases of the import,
Okay.
not 6.
So the motion's made and seconded for discussion?
And that's continued to March 6th?
6th, that's correct. Yes. Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Article 39. It's a zoning map change from LC and RC to R1 for portions of Brant Point, as recommended in the Brant Point Area Plan. Properties included in this article are located off of Cliff Road, Cornish Street, Easton Street, Hulbert Avenue, and Jefferson Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, on the map behind you, you see that these properties are going from the commercial district to a residential district. As we start from here, these are properties next to the White Elephant that are residentially used, so they're going to the surrounding R1 district. Same, this one property that's a leftover in RC would go to R1 and join its other neighbors here along Hulbert Ave. There's some random pieces that, again, got left out in earlier zoning, so they're pieces of property. I've spoken to the property owners here that didn't realize that this was affecting their lot, and they were supportive. This is a split zone here. This divides a property on a zoning line, and there's a small cottage that, again, would join its rear neighbors here.
Thank you.
This type of rezoning, specifically the one up next to the jetties, was discussed extensively at the Brant Point Area Plan Work Group. So I believe if these were supported, particularly the one up next to the jetties. The jetties has since been rezoned from commercial to R40. Is that what it is now?
Yes.
So that was taken out of commercial, so we have one residential property that is zoned RC, which is not appropriate. It was the original beach club, 100 years ago. There's some pretty cool pictures of it with all the little cabanas, which is now all residential, owned by one family. But I know there's some pushback on that, but that was stressed in the area plan work group that become residential, and that we clean up all the other little ones that shouldn't be commercial.
On the board, ladies and gentlemen of the public. All right.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Do I hear a second? Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Pleasure of the board.
Motion to support.
And do I hear a second? Second. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. That was some good conversation. I do appreciate it. You brought up some good points before us. Thank you. Article 40. This is a zoning map change from RC to ROH for properties located off Fayette, Meter, Union, and Washington Street.
Mr. Chairman, on the map behind you, this is a proposal to change the current zoning from commercial to residential, RC to ROH. There's a companion article with the R1 that currently abuts this area. So, in essence, this entire area would go to ROH. It includes where the town parking lot is, properties fronting along Washington Street, roughly to the vicinity of Francis, and then there's another isolated leftover of RC here on this property, located off of Coffin. And, Mr. Chairman, this does include where the funeral home was located. If there was a decision to keep the funeral home, I don't think that's currently the plan, but a funeral home is allowed by special permit in ROH, so it would be possible.
Yep. Thank you. Board members?
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
too,
sir.
I'd just add, on this particular article, I'd request that you do not close the public hearing and suggest that a continuation to the March 10th meeting, 6th meeting be in order. There's one property that wasn't included. We want to make sure to contact the owner.
Gotcha. Would anyone in the audience like to comment on this as we open the public hearing?
Yes, I would.
Please.
My wife and I own 77 Washington Street.
And for the record, sir?
Peter Shaw.
Thank you.
And we're just wondering why the other side of the street isn't being changed to RC, number one. Why there's one little lot in the middle there that hasn't been changed. Right there,
This
yes.
one? Yep.
And also, it's probably the heaviest traveled street on the island. And to be limited to single-family dwellings, I just don't understand the planning board's reasons. Maybe you could help me.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to turn it over to Steph,
Okay.
please.
The missing property is the one that we have to fix, so that...
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
The opposite side of the street, the open spaces are being rezoned to R40, which leaves a few remainders at this point. So we haven't proposed changing anything on the water side. Instead, we're focusing on the inland side. So this site is in the Harbor Overlay District, which actually currently prioritizes some commercial use, even though I would say our long-term plan is to gradually remove structures along there. So if if this property, which is at the end, it's next to the town senior center, it's this one? Even though the new house, not of that shape, you're constructing now, right?
Right.
Right.
If there's, it's possible that we could remove that out of the article if there's a commercial option. The RC district is a district that we are working to phase out, however. So at some point, we need to talk about what the other district would be.
Have there been any other comments by property owners that are affected by this?
No.
No. Thank you.
Does that help? Thank you.
So I'll make a motion to put this, unless there's anything.
That's what I want to find out. I'm not saying anyone.
I'll make a motion to put this over for further review to March 6th.
Okay. Do I hear a second? Second. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Article 41, this is a zoning map change from R1 to ROH for properties located off of Coffin, Fayette, Francis, Meter, Union, and Washington Streets.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you can see on the map behind you, the areas in orange are two isolated areas of R1. These areas, especially the right side of Union as you're driving towards town, have all the characteristics of the ROH on the other side. This particular isolated location of R1 really doesn't make sense, and we received quite a bit of support from the abutters who live there, who often have to go to the ZBA for front yard setback issues, and they have, I think there was quite a few in favor of this particular change. So again, I think it uncomplicates the area. It's treated as old historic from the HDC perspective, and to have two separate districts here, I don't see particular logic in that. So we would ask that you support this article.
Board members, any discussion? Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, the public hearing is open, so if anyone would like to comment on this.
Motion to close the public hearing?
And a second to that? Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Motion to support?
Thank you. And do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Article 42, this is a zoning map change from RC to CN for properties located off of Milestone and Old South Roads.
Mr. Chairman, this area is along Old South Road. It includes the Inquirer Mirror property and other businesses and one home, two homes, and a cottage owned by the Inquirer Mirror. It's a commercial district now, RC. This area is proposed to change from RC to commercial neighborhood. It is a less intense district and actually fits the area more appropriately and is part of the RC phase-out. We recommend approval of this article.
Okay.
I'm in favor of this one, but I'm beginning to think, and I know I've had this concern expressed to you before, that not allowing single-family dwellings in CN, whereas RC does, we may be pushing that too far in favor of the commercial side. So maybe at some point we might want to rethink that CN. I know there's another article coming up later that sort of adjusts the apartment issue, but I think maybe we need to sort of look at the single-family dwelling or allow for a special permit for a single-family dwelling if there's mitigating circumstances or whatever. Because we're getting rid of all the RC, which does allow it now, and that's huge blocks of property with the CN, because that's the best one that fits the RC. But I think we might have to, at some point in the next 6 months or so, look at this single-family dwelling thing again. Just throwing it out there. But I support this article.
Okay. Any other discussion from the board? Ladies and gentlemen, public hearing is open at this stage, if anyone would like to comment. Not seeing any.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously, and the pleasure of the board.
Motion to support.
And do I hear a second? Second. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Article 43, this is a zoning map change from R10 to CN for properties located off of Hooper Farm and Fairgrounds Road and Sparks Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, this group of properties is somewhat adjacent to the area that we just considered. This area, as shown on the map, is currently in the R10 residential zone. The proposal here is to change this to CN so it would join the other group that we considered along Old South Road. The minimum lot size in this district is 7,500 square feet, and at one time, property owners had requested that RC be extended across the street. At that time, there was resistance to do that because it would have created the potential for subdivisions and basically just residential development at 5,000 square feet instead of actual commercial, keeping property that might be used for commercial purposes. So there's no subdivision potential here. The lots either meet the 7,500 or exceed it, but don't exceed it more than twice. There's been some commercial use already, at least in the properties next door to Gold Star Drive at different times. And because this street is certainly, I wouldn't call a residential street and has a lot of traffic to the nearby Mid-Island area, we think it's an appropriate change.
Board members? Ladies and gentlemen of the public, if you'd like to comment, please. Aye.
My name's Matthew Rainham. I live at 6 Newtown, which is the lot that would be abutted on two sides, down a little bit, down one more. Yes, right there. So that's where I live. So you're talking about changing two of my abutting lots to commercial. I don't agree at all. I don't think it makes any sense. No commercial activity is happening in any of those lots now that I know of. I don't think it's allowed to. I don't see. There's a very Newtown is a very residential street. This whole neighborhood is a very residential street, and you have natural borders with the roads, with the zoning right now. You have commercial allowed on one side of the street, and then the road creating a natural border. And by doing this, you're spilling over into the residential area and having commercial abut residential with no real reason I can see. So to say that it's a commercial way right now, I think is largely in error. It is on one side of the street, and one is very, very residential. So I don't support this at all. I would ask that the board not recommend this. And I think looking at that map, you see, just the way the roads are, it's a pretty clear-cut decision. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else on the yes?
I'm Julie, same property. I heard a couple of things tonight that, Barry, you said that you want to recognize a neighborhood for what it is.
Yep.
That area in red is residential. At 6 o'clock tonight, I came down Sparks Avenue going out to the Rotary. I had to go to the airport. There were 10 residential units in that red section. 8 of them had lights on at 6 o'clock tonight. They are residential. They're year-round. They're the people who cut my grass, my electrician, the caretakers. To keep it what it is would be to keep it residential. The CN has been a problem in so many areas tonight that I think it's a really big mistake to do this. I think that the no single-family dwellings, so you're going to take all those residential areas and say that you can't have a single-family dwelling there? I just don't think this is right. Several of the neighbors, I don't know who gets the letters, the notifications, but this letter that went out, nobody's gotten it yet. if the abutters are supposed to get it. As of last night, no one had gotten it. I got a copy of it from Linnell, emailed it to me on Friday. But there is a lot of opposition to this, not just from us here tonight, but there's a few others that couldn't come tonight and wanted to send letters. So if you don't just turn it down and get rid of it and think that it's a bad idea, at least continue it so that the rest of the neighbors can have their say. All right, thanks.
Just for clarification,
Please.
there's not a mailing and a notice requirement to individual properties. We do that to the affected properties as a courtesy. It's the advertising for the hearing is the notice, but we still want to hear from people.
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
yeah.
Let me just see if there's anyone else in the audience who wants to comment on it. All right. Board members, what's your pleasure?
I'll make a motion to continue this to March 6th.
Okay. And do I hear a second? Second. Motion is made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you. Okay. That's going to bring us to Article 52. This is a zoning map change from LUG 2 to R40 for properties located off of South Shore Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had received requests from areas, from residents on Wero to take a look at this particular area. The lots in this article are within the town overlay district, and they're currently non-conforming to their zoning district. They're in an LUG 2 or 80,000 square foot zone. You may remember in the past we did make some changes to this neighborhood by including the R40 district, which is located in the purple on the map behind you. So again, this particular zoning designation, which is an increased density, so it's currently LUG 2 or 80,000 would move to LUG 1 or 40,000.
Okay.
So again, the reason for it, it follows the particular town overlay district line. It has a lot in common with the surrounding property that was rezoned to R40. And there were several property owners that had asked for the board to consider this.
Okay. Board members? Yeah, go ahead, Linda.
Did you ever talk to Barbara Malcolm? They still own all that stuff in the front of it.
I spoke to a representative of Barbara Malcolm, and they indicated they were in favor.
Because they proposed, I think we had a preliminary plan or something, didn't we?
We did have a preliminary plan at some point, which never followed through to a definitive.
But that was based on a 2-acre zone as opposed to the one?
Correct.
Okay.
I think it's worth noting that this property will abut the Sachem's Path development, which is immediately located to the north, the red line, which has a substantial density. And normally our density considerations, we do take that into consideration for fairness, that there's a gradual sort of diminution of the density as you move away from more dense development. This area is served by water and sewer.
Yep.
So. The line actually does divide that property, and it follows, like I said, the town overlay district. That portion in the back goes with a portion at the northernmost part, so it's like an L-shaped property.
Oh, that piece that goes that way. That piece up in the corner is the housing authority.
This is where the Sachem's Path, this is the housing authority here. This is one property, correct. And this area is in a separate article, as mentioned, and in a different proposal.
Okay, great. Board members, anything else? Thank you. Hi.
Eileen Barth. I'd just like to say that I spoke with my neighbor, Jacques Mickey, and he said that these two articles were brought to him as in a proposal, and they were asked to sign on, and they really, he and his neighbor Chris didn't really understand what was being proposed. I'm going to speak to the next article because it more directly affects me, but I guess what I'm asking is that these next three articles, this one and the next two, be held over. I'm sorry. Be held over for March 6th. And I'll speak to that on the next article.
All right. On this article, is there anyone else in the audience? Mr. Collier, good.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Cormac Collier. Finally, sort of to an easy one. Just in response to Linda's comment and sort of putting the planning hat on because of what we could see out there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lots are owned by the Malcolm family. Basically, every lot that is not built on. So, if you are going to, I was going to say that I'm opposed to this, and generally, as you know, Land Council are opposed to these. But I understand to the north is the Sachem's Path. Linda and Nat's successful petition on the stuff south to get lug 1, and then across the road, Jamie Cabral's successful petition to do lug 1 is there, or to do changes to R40. I understand that this is sort of a donut hole, and that there might, at least on this side of the road, that there might be some consideration. But in terms of planning in the future, you have one owner controlling, I just did the math, probably with a road, it's 15, potential of 15 lots. If you change this lug 2 to R40, and then the next article is asking lug 2 to lug 1. So maybe just talking to the Malcolm family again and saying, what do you want, what are you looking for in terms of a lug 1 subdivision, and talking to them before you actually make the recommendation to do the zoning change. In the end, you'll probably be for it because of just the planning, but it might be good to make the contact because they're basically the owner out there for this article, except for the southerly lot, and then they have the two other vacant lots. So they're going to be most impacted, and that's basically, in terms of an AR subdivision, that's where your subdivision is going to go. All the other changes that you see before you, actually, they can do an AR on the side on the side, but all the other changes is just going to be A&R. So you're not really going to have a say. You're going to have a say with the A&R. So it might be interesting in terms of just what they're planning.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else in the audience want to comment on this? Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to put over to March 6th.
Okay.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded for March 6th. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Article 53. That's a zoning map change from LUG 2 to LUG 1 for properties located off Myacomet Road, South Shore Road, and Werowero Lane.
Next slide, please, Catherine. Mr. Chairman, this particular area, again, is to the west, and it is in an area designated as country. So any LUG district is appropriate here. Generally, it's currently LUG 2. LUG 1 was discussed on the petition that was submitted by the people that were referenced, at least to look at it. And I have had a conversation with Mr. Zemicki, who may have changed his mind on this particular article. So in full disclosure, one of our board members, Ms. Howard, who's not here, her property is included here. And she did not request this. This particular, again, if you look at, there is an area of 1 acre zoning that basically ends here at South Pasture Lane. And the point was to, again, based on if we were going to be changing these particular properties, to at least include all of them for discussion on whether or not that was something that was desired or not. So if not, we can certainly move on to other things, but at this point, I thought it was worth again, based on the petition from the Wero owners, to include the entire area to have this particular discussion.
Okay. Grant. Anything from the board?
Her property's in this.
That's okay. Come on down, please.
Over 25 years ago, I moved from my house in town out to this area because I wanted more privacy and I liked the country feel. And I am not convinced that this is a good idea, intensifying the properties I'm directly affected by. This article is the one that I'm more concerned with. And I wasn't aware of this until I got some of the paperwork in the mail. Again, I'm not convinced it's a bad thing, because I could subdivide my property. But I don't think it's a good thing. I really, this gives me a taste of spot zoning disguised as something else. Because all the other lots are built out. Jacques and Chris and Kate and the Malcolm property that is developed, we're all pretty comfortable the way we are. So it's the empty lot that benefits by intensifying right next to us. Mm-hmm. And I'd at least like to see it held over to March 6th.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I think the reason that at least it was considered, and it's fine if the sentiment is to leave the zoning in place, but it is unusual. We have half acre on this side, essentially 10,000 plus on this side, and the 1 acre on this side. And, it's fine if people have changed their minds, but there were at least some, we had some indication that there was interest in that. Right. So I think the March 6th holdover is fine to get some additional input. Yeah. I actually appreciate Cormac's suggestion that maybe, an overall plan could be discussed between now and then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cormac Collier. In regards directly to this article, in terms of an environmental standpoint, I think what we see in terms of Maya Comet Road, right? Not Ave. Road? I always say mix them up. Maya Comet Road. This property after you pass this area after you pass the Norcorta Road affording households subdivision, it is very well vegetated. It is really matches Lug 2. I think you have one house on the right-hand side that is 1.4 acres, and I don't know if that would be subdivided. I think it's pre-existing non-conforming. I don't know what the square footage, the 1.4 would be for 40,000 square feet, but all the others, as has been indicated, would be able to be re-subdivided. This area is not in the sewer district. They're all on septic. So in terms of coming up here and talking about environmental points, that would be my greatest point, is that it's not on, they're all on septic. We have now spending $150,000 of town money to look at Maya Comet Pond, to do the beginning steps of restoration of the pond, analysis of the pond similar to what we've done with Hummock. There will be additional reports and research towards Maya Comet as well, and adding in additional septic effluent into the pond right now, in my opinion, is not the best thing. Also, after you pass Sherburne, the land bank property, that's just the basically rectangle, and then the elderly housing property, you have Sylvia's two properties. She has one that's built and one that's vacant. Those could be re-subdivided into 4 lots. And then you have 2 southerly properties. Those are Andrew Ferreira's. Those actually have conservation restrictions held by the land bank. Land bank purchased the whole bottom brown bit and then purchased conservation restrictions on those 2 properties, and those can't be re-subdivided. So whichever way you go, those should be removed. But again, in terms of my primary position, Land Council's position, in terms of an article of concern at this town meeting, this is the one that we're most concerned about in terms of environmental effects. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience want to comment on this?
Motion to hold to March 6th.
Okay, do I hear a second? Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Article 54, this is a zoning map change and zoning bylaw amendments to the map entitled Town and Country Designations for the Myacomet Greenbelt. The zoning map change from LUG 2 to LUG 3 for properties off of Myacomet Road, Myacomet Village, and Surfside Road. A zoning map change from R10 to LUG 3 for properties off of Myacomet Road. A zoning map change from C-Tech to LUG 3 for properties off of Surfside Road. And amendments to the map entitled Town and Country Designations in order to remove the properties included in this article from the town district and to place them in the country districts are proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the map behind you, it's a little confusing, but in essence, the area in gray is LUG 3 now. There is a area that we have referred to as the Myacomet Greenbelt, which is running adjacent to Myacomet Road here. The map included this parcel by error, so anyway, that needs to be fixed. The land bank and the town together own most of this land in here. At one point, it was the site of the Human Services Center. There was discussion about possible affordable housing here. In the meantime, there has been a warrant article, and there's some native Indian burial grounds that exist in there, so it's generally, pardon me? Right, so it's been identified as a sensitive area. The proposal here is to extend the LUG 3 district through this property, so it's one uniform piece of open space land, and to extend the country district around that same extension so it matches its LUG 3 designation, which would bring that entire greenbelt up to Surfside Road. And then the property there's other articles basically to convey those to the land bank and have a unified greenbelt land bank parcel.
Go ahead.
It does include a parcel owned by Mrs. Howard, Mr. and Mrs. Howard here on Myacomet Road, which is on the pond side of the property, which is currently LUG 2, which would move to LUG 3.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm not exactly sure what my position is here as the chairman of the Housing Authority. I can't represent before my own board, but we'll have a discussion about those pieces on that side. Now, I've got a map that I've got here also has a square that's not up there.
The intent of the squares were, I believe those were identified as being held as green spaces in front of the Housing Authority properties.
Which may need to go away, so that's why I'm saying
Okay.
we should probably have another conversation another place.
So, Mr. Chairman, it probably makes sense to, depending on whatever other public comment there is, to continue this to the 6th.
Is there anyone not hearing anything else from the board at this point? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on this? Okay.
Chairman, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. McLaughlin.
Question, Mr. Moore. Who owns this here?
It's owned by Mr. and Mrs. Howard.
Oh, I thought they were here. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to continue to March 6th.
Okay. And do I hear a second? Chair will second it for discussion. Is there any discussion on the article? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
All right. So, Mr. McLaughlin, you're in the affirmative for continuing this to 3-6?
Yeah, I'm going to abstain on it. Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin wishes to abstain on this as well, too, so that will be...
John, you got to vote in favor to move it to the 6th, otherwise you can't.
Yeah, it's not going to go
It's
anywhere.
not going anywhere.
Right.
I can't vote on it.
I didn't make a motion to move it to the 6th.
They can't.
Then it's not going anywhere. It has to stay open right now. They need 3 votes to go to the 6th.
Right, just to move
I
it...
can't vote on it.
Because she is on the Housing Authority.
I'll change my vote, Mr. Chairman, to yes approval.
All right, and that way at least we can get to the 6th to kind of, thank you, Mr. McLaughlin, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so the vote is 3 in favor and 1 abstention at this point, Ms. Williams. Thank you. Article 55, this is a zoning map change from RC, ROH, R1, R10, and R20 to R40 for Town Overlay District open space. Properties included in this article are located off of Commercial Wharf, New Whale and Washington Streets, Harborview Way, East Creek Road, Mill Street, North Liberty Street, Galen Avenue, Cato Lane, Grove Lane, Hummock Pond Road, and Somerset Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This follows up on a long-term policy that we've had to move protected open space into its proper zoning districts, excuse me. Here we would be moving properties that are currently in various high-density districts to the lowest density district in the town overlay district, which is R40. If you look behind you, you'll see there's a series of waterfront parcels that are owned either by the town or the land bank. Children's Beach and various properties along Washington Street, and a property bordering the creeks. Next slide. A property in Brant Point owned by the land bank, and several other properties owned by the land bank on the edges of town, etc. Next slide. 2 recent acquisitions on Cato Lane by the land bank, open space related to a cluster on Bartlett Road, land bank property at the corner of Hummock Pond and Somerset Lane. And the next slide. Oh, thank you. So those are the parcels in question.
Okay, great. Did you have something, Linda?
I just got a little confused by the one that was the subdivision, that cluster subdivision off of Bartlett Road. I couldn't figure out what was happening there. It looks like a very pretty picture, but does that put that cluster part itself in the middle of the R40 in jeopardy of a spot zone, or is that upper corner touching the rest of it? You see what I'm saying?
Yep. There's actually a way that goes through and connects that. So I believe it's part of a continual.
Okay.
You know, if you start to see that there's continual connections of open space, and eventually I would like, the board to consider some R40 extensions to connect some of that together over lower density property.
Okay.
Great. Anything else from the board? Mr. Collier, rising to the occasion.
Sorry. Cormac Collier, Nantucket
No.
Land Council. Sorry,
No apology.
Andrew, I should have asked you about this beforehand. It just popped up. But I hadn't seen this. The Trimpe property on the right-hand side, the east side, did they retain any lots in the land bank purchase?
Not aware of that.
I think I think they might have. So I just want to make sure that they don't get non-conforming.
That's a good point.
I could be wrong. I'm sorry, but it just popped up in my head, just in case you guys close it right now.
Okay.
You're talking about right on the road, actually.
On the right-hand side of Cato.
Should we continue that?
Yes.
Yes, we should, if that's the case. Yes.
It's all part of the same article. So.
It's all part of the same article, so. Anyone else in the audience want to comment on this?
To put over for review to March 6th.
Okay, and do I hear a second to that? Motion's made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Article 56, zoning map change from VR to VN for a portion of a single parcel located at 1 Popus Road.
Mr. Chairman, in your packet, you'll see a request from the attorney for the owner here. This is commonly known as the Island Lumber property.
Yep.
We worked with them to remove this property from the RC2 district several town meetings ago. Mm-hmm. At that time, we talked about basically the VN covering the commercial area, the active commercial area. Mm-hmm. Since that time, there's been an expansion of the commercial property at the Don Allen Ford that the owners feel has impacted the viability of that northerly portion of the property, and they have asked for the property to be joined together in one zoning district as VN.
Board members? Anyone in the audience wishing to comment on this?
Motion to close the public hearing?
Do I hear a second? Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously.
Motion to support?
Do I hear a second? This is Article 50. Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Article 58. Are you recusing yourself for the entire meeting, sir, or for just this one article?
No, I have to leave the meeting.
Mr. McLaughlin, okay. Let the record reflect Mr. McLaughlin is...
Andrew.
Yep.
What are we doing, 57?
Okay. Duly noted, sir. That brings us to Article 58. This is a zoning map change from LUG 3 to SR 20 and/or LUG 1 for properties located off of Sankaty and Baxter Roads.
Wrong one. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, on this Article 58, Catherine, the slide shows this incorrectly as 55. This article, we're in no way ready for the board to make any sort of recommendation on this. We would ask that you continue this to the March...
March 6th. Or do you want...
I want this at the longer, what was it, the 10th? What was your other date that we agreed to?
March 6th is the longer meeting.
Yeah. March
Oh.
10th is the planning board meeting.
Okay.
No.
So,
Yeah. But
okay.
February
So I guess we
10th
haven't
is the
been...
planning board meeting.
We haven't been extending any to February 10th. I
No, we
guess,
haven't.
Yet, okay. My mistake, thank you.
That's okay, so...
I'll make a vote unless you want to ask if anyone's out there.
Just,
I do.
if I could just give you just the concept here.
Sure.
Is that this article, with other articles that are inserted in this year's town meeting warrant, is here to allow for certain negotiations with property owners to work on access issues that are affecting the northern end of Baxter Road from Bayberry north. So this isn't an article to randomly create additional lots or to give anything away. It's here to allow for possible discussion with the property owners on resolving a very difficult problem, I will tell you.
Yep.
Town staff, including myself, have worked with the county commissioners. They've had a lot of discussions on trying to allow for access should Baxter Road be compromised, and it is quite a daunting task. So at some point, I expect, after negotiations have been held, Board of Selectmen or county commissioners, whoever is sort of leading the negotiation effort, will produce some kind of a recommendation to the planning board on how we might or might not proceed on this particular article.
Understood. Board members? Anyone in the audience want to comment on this? Rhoda, good evening.
For the record, Rhoda Wyman. I'm representing several concerned abutters on Baxter Road who are very, very concerned about the density that's proposed with the SR 20 and looking what could result with a change to SR 20. There could be a 9-lot subdivision with an A&R plan, and there could be a 14-lot subdivision with an AR plan. So we could live with the change to a Log 1 district, but are very, very concerned with an SR 20. So I'd ask you to take that into consideration when you come back to the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Collier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cormac Collier, Nantucket Land Council. I'll wait the bulk of comments when it gets continued, but I understand there's sensitive negotiations going on in the background that the public can't be privy to, but if the basis of this change is is those negotiations and the outcome of those negotiations. I just hope that as much can be divulged at the proper time to the planning board and to the public so that we understand why truly this should be changed. And then as a comment in terms of somebody who also unfortunately has been involved with this for the past couple of years, that adding additional density on an eroding bank is just going to exacerbate future planning problems in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We're just creating another problem for future people to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience want to comment on this? Pleasure of the board.
Motion to move to March 6th.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Excuse me just for 1 second.
Next page. Next page.
All right. Article 59, this is a zoning map change from SR 20 to LUG 3 for properties located off of Baxter Road. Andrew?
Mr. Chairman, this article proposes to do the opposite of the earlier article. It's taking properties that have been seen some major erosion and removal of dwellings and other assorted activity and moving them out of their current SR 20 designation to LUG 3. It reduces the overall intensity on these properties. Should there be some restabilization, rebuilding in this area is something that in erosion-prone areas, is something that we have done throughout the island. When that happens, we try to bring those areas to a low-intensity district. So we've tried to avoid where houses are. I know there is one house in here that's right up against the road.
This one's already moved.
But I think we have it right in the other group.
That's
So.
demolished.
All set?
Yep.
Beautiful. Board members?
Yeah. They go together, so.
Anyone in the audience want to comment on this? Mr. Cohen, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Stephen Cohen. I represent the Staff Beach Preservation Fund, well, not any of the individual property owners, although a lot of them are members. I think probably all of them are members. I think I understand where Mr. Voice with the staff is getting at here, but I think this particular article is particularly premature given the situation on the ground out there. I think the erosion control measures have just gone in within the past couple of weeks, or even less than that, and this has a really low impact on the ability to people to build out there, in the sense that because of the zoning setbacks and because of the loss of land to begin with, it's not as if the entire lot is available for these large structures anyway. But what you are doing here is creating greater setbacks and lowering, so you're essentially creating unbuildable lots as opposed to less buildable lots. And then the second thing that you're doing is really essentially lowering the value of these lots. And these lots either, I don't think that zoning should be used, or my client certainly doesn't think that zoning should be used to make lots unbuildable, and also doesn't think that zoning should be used for lots that aren't going to be built on, shouldn't be used to lower the values of those lots, because what is a high likelihood is that some or all of these lots, as we go through this process, will be donated into conservation, and lowering the value of those essentially reduces the incentive for the person to do that. So while this zoning article may have a time and place that's appropriate, I think it's a little premature, and frankly a little hurtful to the people whose wounds are still open that have lost their houses. And I think that maybe putting this off and having it as more considering it more comprehensively in the next go-around on Baxter Road is probably a better time to address this, because I think we're going to see a number of zoning articles next year dealing with betterment district and trying to deal with sort of the long-term planning, and that this is a good thing that we might want to consider in the long-term planning, but not necessarily something that I think should get rolled into the zoning changes that are being considered right now that have to do with road layout and those kind of things. So I would recommend or request that the planning board recommend take no action or table this motion, as opposed to being for or against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience want to comment on this?
Mr. Chairman, I might suggest that we continue this to consider with the other article. I am somewhat sympathetic. Certainly, no one wanted to cause a problem for, I guess, Mr. Cohen's non-clients or whoever he's talked about. We have rezoned areas like Codfish Park, which used to contain houses, and I guess as long as it's done one day, I think it's irresponsible for us to continue to leave areas that have seen the kind of complete destruction available for reconstruction of similar-sized houses. I think that in order to rebuild on these types of properties, they might need to seek some certain protections, which I think would be appropriate considering the history here. But I will concede there might be a different time to do that, but I think we may know more on March 6th.
Okay. Great. Anyone else in the audience want to comment on this? Hearing not.
I'll make a motion to put over to March 6th.
And do I hear a second? Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Article 60, this is a zoning map change from SR 20, R20, LUG 1, and LUG 2 to LUG 3 for Syosconset open space. Properties included in this article located off of Bass, Bluefish, and Hydrangea Lanes, Low Beach, Milestone, Sankaty, Cathcart, Schimmel Pond, and Eel Point Roads, and Main Street, Syosconset, Burnell Street, Quahog, and Scallop Courts, and Nobodere Avenue and Juniper Hill.
Mr. Chairman, this is an article that we are going to have to put over as well. There was a problem with the advertising that didn't identify all of the properties. But generally, the concept here is that these are properties that are protected open space, owned by the town or owned by the various, here the Sconset Trust owns many of these properties. And again, accurately portraying our land and moving protected land into the lowest intensity district. These are all in the country district, so are appropriate for the lowest intensity district outside the MMD, but which that landform isn't here, which is LUG 3. So we won't be able to actually close the hearing.
I understand.
Tonight, but
go ahead.
Like the thing on Bartlett Road, I didn't quite get it because my little copy didn't really give it to me. What's going on with the subdivision right there off of Milestone Road?
That's the
whoop-de-doo up there.
That would be the open space for the cluster.
Okay, so that it's keeping the cluster out of it.
Correct.
Okay, and down here, I didn't think there was a cluster down here behind the old water company property. See that little? See all the little lots in there?
It's an inactive subdivision.
It's still inactive? Because I remember seeing it on the paper years ago.
I believe it's been all purchased and all.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I have no problem with it, but you want to continue it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just check in with our audience real quick. Anyone in the audience want to comment on this?
Motion
Go
to
ahead.
carry to March 6th.
And discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Article 61 is a zoning bylaw amendment to Section 139-12B to modify the requirements of the public wellhead recharge district.
Mr. Chairman, this is a zoning bylaw amendment. We've been working with Wannacomet Water Company and their consultant to go through the wellhead regulations and update them, check for compliance with DEP regulations, that type of thing. And one issue that has come up last year, the wellhead district was expanded over into the area that was identified for commercial use. So some commercial uses were prohibited. This bylaw change would relax some of the prohibited uses and allow them by special permit, and just generally update the bylaw to reflect current DEP regulations, code references, that type of thing.
Okay.
And, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I did receive a question from a town staff member that I need to investigate. So we should continue this
Okay.
to February 10th.
Got it. Yeah, because I think this can, it sounds like through Leslie, this has a short resolution to it, but go ahead.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with somebody, the Holgate's Laundry, because something changed in reference to laundromats.
Okay.
And they just wanted to know what the impact was on Holgate's and any expansion from that, since they own the property around them now.
Mm-hmm.
So you might want to have that conversation with Don.
Okay. All right. Anyone in the audience want to comment on this? Mr. Collier?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is the last time you'll hear from me. Thanks
sure.
to the staff and to the planning board. Huge list, probably the largest zoning list I've seen in a while. So thanks for doing the work. You got a lot of good stuff that you've been doing in terms of changing the zoning, which you guys have been trying to change for a while. So I appreciate that. Also, I was just going to ask Bob, but he's here, Mr. Gardner, but he's here. There's a change in terms of there's an existing rule in terms of you're limited to 110 gallons per day per 10,000 square feet in the wellhead recharge district, and now it's allowing that to continue. It's allowing it to go above and beyond if there's a denitrification system. Maybe I'll just, since it's going to be continued, I can just ask Bob about that. And then there's another one which I wanted to bring your attention, which basically now allows discharge of 2,000 gallons per day, which is very large. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but it's going to allow it as long as it's a denitrification system. So it's basically going from no effluent after 2,000 to effluent that's treated, but it's still going to have some sort of impact. Just something I wanted to work out with him and put that on your radar screen. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else in the audience want to comment on this? Board members?
Motion to hold over to March 6th?
I think February 10th on this one.
Okay.
All right. So motion's made for February 10th and seconded, sir?
Second.
All right. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Article 62 is a zoning bylaw amendment to Sections 139-18, 19, 20, and 20.1 to modify the requirements for parking, driveways, screening, lighting, and off-street loading. Leslie, please.
Mr. Chairman, this bylaw change pertains to 4 sections of the zoning bylaw, Sections 18, 19, 20, and 20.1. This bylaw change is largely a reorganization. Just over time, those sections have become kind of jumbled, and there are driveway standards and with parking, and aisle standards and with driveways, and so we're really just trying to clean that up a bit. The main substantive changes would be to remove parking in the commercial downtown district. The board has talked for a long time about not being inclined to grant waivers there, but yet being in a position where the people can't possibly provide the parking. So we have included that. Some commercial off-street parking requirements have been updated. We did not do as complete of an overhaul on the commercial parking requirements as we had hoped to do, but we are at least starting that process this town meeting. The off-street loading zone has been sort of an ongoing issue for applicants at the planning board and the ZBA, where they're requesting waivers fairly consistently, and they've been granted fairly consistently. So we have removed the off-street loading requirement, except where a project is under review by the special permit granting authority, and they can make a determination about that. We have differentiated between residential and commercial driveways. There's a little bit of an ambiguity in the bylaw on that. We removed all the lighting requirements. There is now a general bylaw that applies to all properties within the town. We don't need to duplicate that in the zoning bylaw and maybe create differences in regulations. And we provided some new driveway options for the R5 district. And this goes along with the discussion we had with the Marianne Drive properties back in the summer. We have tried to develop some solutions for those where they could provide more off-street parking, really directly off the street with some landscaping elements included. I did.
Hang on for one second. All set?
Yes.
Go ahead.
And I expressed it earlier today to the staff about, I saw one scenario where there were 3 parking spaces spread out across as a matter of right, which is 30 feet plus across. I saw that scenario on a piece of paper. Is that only with a special permit, Andrew?
No, it's 27. I don't believe it's 30.
Well, it's 99927, but
Right. It's not, if there were tandem extensions, it would require a special permit, but it's in the R5 district only.
those are small
And
lots.
there are screening requirements on 2 sides required.
There we go.
Okay, I just
So-
see problems with that, but
The intent, Mr. Chairman, I think we wanted to, we have a bylaw standard that people aren't following.
Right.
In some instances, it requires the entire yards to be eaten up by parking and driveways. This keeps them, closer to the street. I think we've seen examples where if properly landscaped and with some screening, it's actually fine. There's a burden for people to come in for all these special permits where other people can install driveways and parking by right. And as long as we're done with some landscaping, the HDC reviews hardscaping now, so they would have an opportunity to set standards as well. So again,
which isn't going to be
I think
27 feet.
that was our marching orders after the discussion on the Marianne Drive and some of
Correct.
the other properties.
Correct.
So, again, we're open to your suggestions on, this is new for you, so I think you probably need a little time to absorb all this, and we're open to changes on it as well.
I'm not done, Mr. Chairman. I think, and you heard me say this like 2 or 3 months ago when we first started talking about that for R5, that I was sort of uncomfortable opening this up to all of the R5, since we're getting rid of, R1? So there's going to be a fairly substantial amount of R5, and some places that's just not appropriate. And there's more, they just are in a better situation than Marianne, Pine Grove, and Macy's. So I was a little leery about allowing this particular scenario all through the R5 as opposed to going special permit up and down those 3 roads. But I understand it's onerous. It's going to tie up our public hearings forever to get them all done. So I'm still sitting on the fence versus opening it up to R5 in general. Question for you, these roads that are listed where you can't back out, can you back out by special permit from the planning board?
Yes.
Okay, because I just didn't catch that in the language, unless it's specified, just a variance.
That language was existing, so we will double-check to make sure it wasn't inadvertently removed.
Okay, it just didn't jump out at me that the special permit was specifically called out for that.
Yeah.
Because
And those-
Leslie, you'll see right here, that prevents that scenario we talked about this morning. You can't back out, regardless of the 25-foot.
All right,
Okay.
anything else from the board? Mr. Gaspar, open the public hearing at this stage, please.
Thank you, Arthur Gasparo. I just have a few comments. This is I guess first and foremost, I would hope that it is going to be continued to the March 6th meeting so that maybe there can be some adjustments made. There's a lot of facets to this one article that I think need to be touched on. In terms of, I tend to agree with Ms. Williams. I think that one of the situations with opening it up to now all of a sudden allowing essentially in all of these districts without review 27-foot wide curb cuts within a requirement for the screening. The issue with the screening without having sort of conditions and having a permit and a review is who enforces it, what is adequate screening, and as we see, it's these rinky, it's not always sort of what you may hope it may be to prevent cumulative degradation if everybody does these sort of things. So I just think we may want to look at that a little bit closer, and that maybe the special permit process it isn't such a bad thing. The other part of the change for the article that's proposed that I didn't hear Leslie mention is the dimensional changes. And I think that is something that the board needs to consider very, very carefully. in terms of the changes of parking spaces from 9 by 20 to 9 by 18, and then in the change of aisle width from 24 to 20 feet. The impact that could have, this moves away from sort of the driveways and into parking lots, and I'm sort of just talking to you as somebody who has laid out and worked on several parking lots, is that one change alone could result in a narrowing of parking lots by up to 8 feet. And I think if I could give you a couple of examples, I thought of Kitty Murtaugh's is one. That right now is at the current minimum. So that is 64 feet. You got 20, 24, and 20. If you would imagine that shrunk down another 8 feet, I think that the standards that you have dimensionally now are good. I think, if anything, in some areas, maybe you have more compact parking that you can handle under your special permit or provision for that. But to just all of a sudden shrink everything down, I think we're going to have some difficulty with maneuverability. An F-150 is 19 foot, 4 inches long. That's bumper to bumper length. So, for a full-size truck. So we start having, I think that you might want to just revisit the dimension, changing shrinking everything down. The other issue with respect to loading zones, I think I agree that there is a lot of places where the loading zones can be waived, but I would hope that the regulatory bodies would retain that power to then say, in this case, you don't need it, and look at it that way, instead of having to say in each situation, we're going to make you do this, instead of having the power as the regulatory body to say you don't have to do this. I think that it's important to keep those. I think most of the businesses have the need for the loading zones. A lot of the businesses, and you as the reviewing agency can consider that. So those are my comments, and thanks for working on this.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience? Catherine, good evening.
Catherine Stover, 5 Liberty Street. I have concerns with this article and the next 3, only in the sense that at some point I have to either divide my property or build a secondary dwelling on the property. Now, it's right downtown. I have 1/4 of an acre, so that's roughly 8,000 square feet. So I think, according to some of these articles and the dimensions that you've got listed, that's permissible. But I don't want to have to get into a whole big thing about having to use my yard for parking or providing parking for off-street. So those are the concerns I have with these 4 articles. So I guess I want some kind of reassurance that, if these go forward, I'm not going to be, messed up and my family.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, the current bylaw, so Catherine's in the ROH district.
Yes.
Yes.
So there's 1 parking spot required now for the primary, and 1 would be required for a secondary dwelling unit. So and one of those could be a compact space, which is not 7 by 17. The board has the ability to, currently, the ZBA, I believe, under this, the planning board would be able to do that in its review. So I think it actually makes your situation under 1 board as opposed to 2.
Yeah.
Right, and the secondary lot is the next article.
Yep.
Which, oh, yeah. ROH is allowed, yeah. So I think this article doesn't hurt you at all. I think it actually is more helpful.
Yep.
Okay. Well, right now I've got the hearse, Lewis's hearse, parked in my backyard. And I really don't want to use my yard for parking.
Right.
So, I'm really kind of nervous about that, having to do that, so, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience want to comment on this?
Motion to hold to March 6th.
Why don't you wait a second for Mr. Lowell to show back up here? Why don't you, yeah, but we're the only two, yes. Yes, do you see why I wanted you to wait a second? There really was kind of
John
a,
wasn't here, so we only three people.
you completely missed him getting up and leaving.
Well, he said something about it, he wandered out.
There you go. All right.
We both know that. Continuing, I would assume.
Yes.
That's my motion.
And do I hear a second? Thank you. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Article 63, this is a zoning bylaw amendment to Section 139-8C to modify the requirements for secondary residential lots. Please.
Mr. Chairman, there are three main points here. And a lot of these issues have just recently come up as more people have been applying for the
Yep.
secondary lots. And some of the result of sort of a misreading of the current bylaw. The proposed changes would add a provision for pre-existing non-conforming lots. Before, there was not any provision, and if someone with a pre-existing non-conforming lot wanted a secondary lot, they had to come to the planning board for a special permit and then go to the zoning board of appeals for a variance.
Right.
So the change would allow the planning board, as the special permit granting authority, to determine the lot sizes as part of their review. The second issue was the requirement for combined driveway access. I believe the intention with the bylaw was to allow the planning board to waive that through special permit, but a strict reading of the bylaw did not allow that. So that also required someone to come to the planning board to get the special permit for the lot, and then they had to go to the ZBA for a variance.
Come under the same.
So now the planning board will be the special permit granting authority for any waivers.
Got it.
Well, for at least those waivers.
At least for those waivers.
And
yes.
then there were some section updates to other bylaw provisions that needed to be corrected.
Got it. Board members? Anyone in the audience want to comment?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Okay. And second discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously.
Motion
And
to support.
thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Article 64 is a zoning bylaw amendment to Section 139-33A to modify the requirements for extensions, alterations, or changes to pre-existing non-conforming uses, structures, and lots. Leslie?
Mr.
Please.
Chairman, this article reorganizes Section 33A. Again, over time and different amendments happened, it just became a little disorganized. There's some clarification for existing provisions of the bylaw.
Yep.
And the substantive changes include adding an additional level of review where you would now have zoning board of appeals review, zoning administrator review, which would essentially stay as is, and then a new level of review through the zoning enforcement officer for conforming additions or conforming alterations to pre-existing non-conforming structures.
On non-conforming
And then the
lots.
other substantive change to this would be to allow basically a redistribution of ground cover in situations where the ground cover is pre-existing non-conforming.
Yep.
It's a little strict right now, and the Zoning Board of Appeals has been granting special permits, but the bylaw didn't explicitly say that, so they're basically going to reflect the current practice. And
Yes, ma'am?
this change does need a little more review, so if we could continue that to February 10th,
Okay.
just to make sure that we haven't overlooked anything.
Got it. All right. Board members? Anyone in the audience?
Motion to hold for February 10th.
All right. And do I hear a second? Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Article 65, the zoning bylaw amendments to Section 139-33E to modify the allowances included but not limited to grandfathered status, ground cover, and setbacks for pre-existing non-conforming uses, structures, and lots. Leslie,
Mr. Chairman.
please.
This article and the one before I didn't mention were requested by the Board of Appeals.
Okay.
So this is, again, another reorganization, clarification of existing language and practices. One thing that the board requested, the current bylaw allows 30% ground cover for lots under 5,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And you can go up to the percentage that's allowed in the district that the lot's located by special permit. They routinely grant those. They routinely do not get any opposition from abutters. And so they have asked to just allow that by right with no special permit.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
For instance, in like ROH, if you had a 4,000 square foot lot, the current bylaw would let you have 30% ground cover. But ROH would allow 50%. So this change would allow you to go straight to the 50%.
Without the mumbo jumbo of the ZBA?
Yes, if you want to put it that way. Most of those permits are in ROH, but it would allow other districts. But in most districts, that doesn't really make sense. You know, like in R5, for example, it would go from 30 to 40. In ROH, it would go from 30 to 50. If it was, out in LUG1 or something, it would go from 30 to 7. It would just stay at the 30. So really, it only applies to the districts where the ground cover that's allowed is over 30%. Okay. And then we'd also add some additional zoning administrator language just to supplement the previous section that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So this needs to be continued to February 10th as well.
Got it. Well, hold on. Give me a moment. I know they are, but that's okay. They're patiently waiting, and God bless them all. I take it, is there anyone in the audience who wants to comment on this? All right. Thank you. And Mr. Lowell, you're going to second that? Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Next thing is a citizens article, which is Article 66. Zoning bylaw amendment.
It's the same one. No, it's in it. It's in the paper. It doesn't have a separate
February 10th. This apartment thing, or do you want to do something?
Are we good? All right. We all good now?
Oh, next slide, Catherine.
All right,
Next.
thank you. So let's try this again.
One more.
You got it?
Yeah.
All right, we're at Article 66, so we're on the same page. This is a citizens article. This is a zoning bylaw amendment to Section 139-2 to amend the definition of apartments so that the prohibition of apartments on the first floor of a commercial structure is removed.
Mr. Chairman, this is a citizen article. It was submitted. We found that our current definition, which talks about apartments only on the second or third or basement, have created some maybe unintended consequences. There have been a few properties that have inquired where an apartment is, say, on the back in a non-commercial location, or maybe possibly on the first floor, sharing with commercial on one side and residential on the other. I believe the particular proponent, I don't see as...
No,
he's not here.
Not here.
I agree with this.
Basically, there was a situation on Windy Way, which is not necessarily an active commercial area, where they wanted a part of the apartment to be on the first floor. And they did go to the ZBA. The ZBA couldn't find grounds to grant that with a variance, I believe, and suggested that we have at least a discussion. We're not ready to give you any sort of a motion tonight. If you generally believe that we should make some allowance, maybe it's a percentage of the floor area, or maybe there's some, we might want to look, we don't want to eliminate commercial, if it's along where there's storefronts, you don't want to eliminate that if possible.
Nobody's going to live in the middle of the storefront anyway, but we do need to do something with this.
Right. So we'll have a proposal for you if we suggest continuing this to the February meeting.
February?
You want to go to February or March on this one?
I think we could go to February, and then if we're not...
If we need to, we can continue it
more,
further.
right.
That's fine. I understand that. Anyone in the audience want to comment on this? Okay.
Motion to move it to February 10th.
And a second discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Article 67, zoning bylaw amendments to Section 139-7A to modify the use chart to correct registered marijuana dispensary, allow additional uses in the CN district, including apartment building, lumber yard, bike rental, and elderly housing facilities. Insert a new use apartment building, insert a new use commercial shed, to insert a new use village motor vehicle parking lot, and to remove the LC column from the town commercial districts. Yeah. Go ahead, Leslie. Andrew?
Mr. Chairman, this proposal, the new uses that are being introduced, apartment building is a concept that we've looked at now that the multifamily overlay district has essentially been eliminated.
Right.
The definition of apartment building is in Article 68, so if you're supportive of at least the concept, it needs to be inserted in the use chart. Will be allowed in two zoning districts only, CN and VN. It tracks the same overall bedroom count as the multifamily overlay district did, at a total of 8 bedrooms. It increased the maximum number of units to 6 from the former limit of 4. So it might allow some one-bedroom units, which our housing studies have shown there's a demand for smaller units. There is the overall density is the same as our higher density, so it's 1 unit per 2,500 square feet.
Yeah.
So you would need to have, for that 6-unit building, a minimum of 15,000 square feet. And that would be needed to accommodate parking and adequate green spaces, et cetera. The commercial, the shed commercial, the way we structured the bylaw, there's a shed under the residential portion, and it's come up. We thought there was other ways that it is really covered in the bylaw, but I think this clarifies for enforcement purposes, so the shed is inserted as a new use in the chart and allowed in the various commercial districts. I think that we probably won't want to remove the LC district because we'll have a few random pieces of it until the next town meeting. So that part will probably change. The medical marijuana treatment center, the Attorney General advised us that that had changed to registered marijuana dispensary. So it's just a really minor correction. And then there are some other uses that upon reflection might be appropriate in the CN district, including the lumber yard, bike rental or sale, and elder housing facility, which would be allowed by special permit in those districts. Did I get everything?
Good. Go ahead.
Andrew, where's the ground cover thing we've been talking about? Andrew, Leslie, which article is that ground cover thing for those subterraneans? Is that in Article 68?
Yes.
That's what they're saying, yeah.
There it is. I got it.
Okay.
Because we have to put that word in there. Okay.
Anyone in the audience want to comment on this?
Motion to close the public hearing, or is this a continued?
I think we're going to want to continue this to March 6th. Hang on just for a second.
Do you want us to continue this one?
I would continue this to
March 6th.
Actually, to February 10th is okay.
Okay.
Do you want to wait and see what the feedback is with the downtown on the LC thing?
He's already going to take it out.
No, I'm just saying, but
I think
it's up to you. We can always continue after March.
I'm pretty confident that, so I think we may end up continuing it at that time, but at least at the 10th we could have a further discussion.
We can further refine this. Okay.
Yep.
All right. And discussion?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. Last but not least, Article 68, zoning bylaw miscellaneous technical amendments to add a definition for apartment building and junkyard, modify the definitions for ground cover and medical marijuana treatment center, to amend the map reference for public wellhead recharge district to reflect a previous bylaw amendment, to modify sections 139-24 to reflect up-to-date practices, and to amend Section 139-30 to update other section references to the zoning bylaw. Leslie, please.
Mr. Chairman, the new definitions that are being added are really a follow-up from the previous article.
Yep.
Junkyard actually is a follow-up from the wellhead article, just so everyone knows what a junkyard is. So it's commercial use. It's not some property owner that collects things. The definition modifications, the medical marijuana treatment centers, just to change the name as recommended by the Attorney General. The ground cover definition is meant to clarify basically rooms underground. Do they count for ground cover or not? And this definition change would say that they do not. Map reference and bylaw section updates, I mean, that's really just a housekeeping matter. And the rate of development bylaw, that's sort of slowly been phasing out, and there are some covenants still around that restrict people's homes to year-round occupancy, and we're changing some language in there so that it's clear on how those covenants are released.
Got it. Go ahead.
I think we were talking about monkeying with the ground cover language for subterranean.
Yes, it needs a few minor tweaks, but...
And I think we were adding some language, Andrew, about moving houses, pieces of houses, portions of structures under the junkyard aspect of it. So I think there's still some changes that have to come to it.
So perhaps February 10th.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyone else on the board? Anyone in the audience? Seeing no one? Motion to continue. Thank you. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed? Thank you. Thank you for having weathered through the process. Not seeing anyone jumping up for public comments. Motion to, what's that? 69 doesn't pertain to us. Made it in there.
You gave it to a 69 and 70, these are all sewer things?
Yeah, those are sewer things, yeah. That was an overrun. You can make paper airplanes later.
Right. More than I need to do.
Unless the board would like to hang out for a while more, I mean, we could, we got time. We'll have to be up till 7.
Mr. Chairman, just
Is there anything else?
I want to thank all the board members. I know this is a lot of hard work for everybody, and I appreciate your efforts.
No problem, and I would second that with you, Andrew, at this point. Thank you to the people in the public who hung out till the bitter end. We do appreciate it.
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 10:17.
Thank you. All those in favor? Yes. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Catherine, how do I shut this off? Square button? Just the stop button. Just the stop button.
Hand it to her. Don't touch, just hand it to her. Hand it to her. There you go.
Still recording, though.
It's all right. Yes, I got that. Thank you so much for dropping it off.
For someone to just...
I appreciate it.
The survey's at least 3,000, probably 5, maybe more, depending. But you have to eventually get in there.